Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
She held on through the thick shrubbery, writhing in blood, arms, and legs. But the pain was nothing compared to the fear that filled her entire being. At some point, Jenna turned back and saw the burning lights of hungry eyes. She lunged forward with all her might, but someone invisible threw her body back to where those hungry eyes were burning. Jenna could smell the scent of predators. It was getting closer by the second, the terror paralyzing her. She wanted to scream, but only a wheeze escaped from her chest. Immediately, several wolves pounced on her, but they did not tear her helpless body. If anything, they begged loudly, "Jenna, wake up. Open your eyes, Jenna." She struggled to pull herself out of the house of eerie dreams and saw her roommate's face above her. Maria smiled kindly at her. "Have you come to your senses? It was a nightmare and a dream. It happens a lot after chemotherapy. I had the same horror dreams. When I was in my first year of treatment, I'm a little more adjusted now." Jenna struggled to sit up in bed. She felt very dizzy and nauseous, and every cell of her body was soapy with extreme pain. "I probably won't make it. It's only my second year, but the first time was much easier." Maria's making a fuss. "Now I'll give you some water. You should drink more." The woman filled a glass and handed it to Jenna. "Of course, it's better to drink natural juices. They are much healthier in this situation." Jenna drank a little from the glass and put it on the nightstand. "My husband should be here today. I'll ask him to buy me some juices. You know, Maria, it all worked out spontaneously. I didn't expect to be diagnosed with such a serious illness. I thought my hemoglobin was dropping again. I was often anemic as a child. Doctors used to wonder where it came from. My parents literally fed me fruit and all sorts of calorie-dense goodies, and I was still like a ghost." Maria's got the look of a connoisseur. Such cases are not rare. And everything is to blame genetics, that in our family everyone was centuries. None of my ancestors had hypertension or cancer, and all the grandparents lived over 90 years. It's just Jenna. Your relatives didn't have the opportunity for a thorough examination. If I'm not mistaken, you're from the country." "Close enough. My native village is considered a district center, but in fact, it is a large village. Most of the population works at the communal combine. By the way, it is one of the oldest enterprises in the region. My grandparents worked there, and my parents are still carrying on the family baton." A rather long monologue deprived the young woman of her last strength, and she sank down on the cushion. Maria sat down next to her and with motherly care adjusted the blanket. "Jenna, save your strength. We have many days ahead of us, so we'll make a deal and even get tired of each other. Breakfast should be brought to us now, and after we eat and drink a little more." The mention of food caused Jenna's stomach to reflexively contract to suppress an attack of nausea. She had to sit up and take a few deep breaths. Her roommate sympathetically patted Jenna on the shoulder. "I couldn't get used to it at first either, but I adjusted quickly. Sour makes the nausea go away. Have some orange juice." Jenna tried to object. "Don't. Maria, are you embarrassing me? My husband will come soon and bring me juice and fruit." The neighbor looked carefully at the companion coup. "Jenna, you must have read books about the war and seen movies." "Of course I have, but I don't see the connection between the last war and my illness." "There is a connection, and it's very direct. Soldiers shared the last of their food with each other. You and I also happen to be in the same foxhole. That is, in this ward. That's why we are ordered from above to help each other. And then it's a common practice. Today I have something, tomorrow you'll have it. We're human beings, not wild wolves." The mention of a forest predator made Jenna flinch again. "Oh, Maria, I've been dreaming about those evil things. You wouldn't believe it. I saw them as if they were real. Even their breath felt so unimaginable sense of reality. Such dreams are what we call faithful dreams. But night dreams are filled with symbols, and wolves can act as an enemy or the same disease. What is explainable in your case?" You should not be frightened by such a vision. My grandmother often told me about the meaning of dreams too. Jenna is silent for a few seconds and then continued to share her conclusions with her neighbor. Maria, I just realized that this creepy dream is a warning from above. Maybe my grandmother is sending me a signal from that Jenna. Although I'm not a mystic, I can't rule it out. You know, Jenna, before my illness, I always thought predictions and omens were nonsense. But now my opinion has changed a lot. The door of the ward opened, and the employee of the food block in a snow-white uniform easily rolled a cart, set plates with the movement of a magician. She grabbed 2 dishes at once with one hand and placed them on the table. Today we have a special recipe for flying girls and cups set up. I'll pour you some hot tea. It took the kitchen worker no more than a minute to serve their room, and she rolled the cart farther down the hall. Jenna critically assessed the appearance of the ethical dish. Cat, baby, how do I eat you? Maria was already actively wielding a spoon. And you, Jenna? Through not wanting to. Imagine you've been given a medicine on which your life depends. The young woman swallowed 5 spoons with difficulty and quickly stuffed the unpalatable breakfast with juice that her neighbor offered her. The latter had already managed to straighten up her porridge and was enjoying her tea. Not enough at all. You've eaten. It won't work that way. It's not working. I get sick to my stomach when I force myself. I'd rather eat a little, but more often. Maybe. Jenna, you are right. Your body will tell you how it is more comfortable, and try to get more rest. Jenna didn't answer the kind woman because she was already dozing off. She could still hear the sounds around her. But her consciousness slowly drifted away to where peace and tranquility waited. She already felt the touch of her grandmother's warm hand and heard an old-fashioned lullaby. In the life of little Jenna, Wendy played not the most important role. The girl's parents were absent 24 hours a day at their mill. It came to the point that the mother and father did not see each other for months because they did not coincide shifts. Therefore, the day came when they had to call on the help of her grandmother. Although Varvara Tikhanov was not flattered that the son and daughter-in-law cannot do without her help, she was helping out. What kind of parents are you if you can't manage with one child? And how in the old days people had time to bend their backs for half a day, and then still at home with all the things to manage. My mom had 6, and she managed. Mike listened to his mother, and then not without irony asked, I agree. My grandmother was good, a real heroine mother. But what did you, Mom, fall behind your ancestors? She only gave birth to me and Stephen. And of the 2 of us, one of us was a foolish mind. Little Jenna wasn't privy to the family history. Only later did she learn that Uncle Stephen had once stepped on a slippery slope. Their family didn't like to talk about the murky business that had gotten a relative exiled to Kolyma. Jenna several times tried to elicit from her grandmother this secret, but Wendy was waved away. It's better for you, granddaughter, not to know. You don't have an uncle, that's all. Otherwise, you could ruin your whole life with that kind of kinship. Mike, your daddy, had to take his wife's name so no one would find out. But that answer didn't sit well with Jenna. Grandma, what did Uncle Stephen do that was so bad? If you knew him as a student, they'd say he was a traitor. I don't believe it. Stephen was framed. He couldn't have done what they say he did. Your grandfather, Ethan, didn't believe it either. He tried to defend his honor. How could you break a system that was grinding up so many innocent people? Where's Grandpa Ethan? Did they put him in jail too? No, Jenna, your grandfather died. When did Stephen's story happen? His heart gave out. He was the secretary of the party organization at the plant. So he had to lose not only his party membership card, but his life as well. Oh, it's better not to remember that time. I still don't know how Mike and I managed to survive. We had to move in with my aunt for a while. When the Stephen story was forgotten, Mike came back to the settlement and married your mom's Kelly. Wendy told this story many times in different variations, but Jenna always found an excuse to ask the elderly relative a couple of additional questions on the subject. Most of all, the girl was concerned about unfamiliar places, While her granddaughter was small, Wendy, as she could, described to her this amazing place. And when Jenna was 10 years old, the grandmother resolutely told her parents all the signs. Jenna is already big. Tie her to her aunt. Let the girl with her own eyes will see the splendor of the Karelian forests. Son and daughter-in-law were surprised by such poetry of speech. A simple woman. But Wendy decided to completely dazzle them and sang. Her naive singing was akin to a toothache, but the couple listened patiently through the popular songs of the Khrushchev thaw. And Mike even got so emotional that a tear came to his eye. "Okay, Mom, let Jenna come with you this summer." "Really, we were thinking of sending her to camp." The girl overheard outside the door. She'd forgotten all about vigilance. All she had to do was tell her father about camp. "Daddy, I'm not going. I'm going to your camp. I've had enough of last summer. It sucked. And the soup they gave us was terrible." The parents screamed at Jenna. Most of all, the 10-year-old girl was struck by the Karelian forests, although their village was also among the pine forests. The forests of the former parts of the Suomi Republic stretched for hundreds of kilometers, and anyone unfamiliar with the area could easily get lost. Anna, Wendy's aunt, had therefore warned her at once. "You girl, don't go beyond the village. It's easy to get confused even 5 steps away from home." Anna was also struck by Jenna. The girl thought that there was no one in the world older than her grandmother. But it turned out that Anna is older than her niece by as much as 25 years. When Jenna added the two values in her mind and got 93 as a result, she could not cope with excitement for a long time. But Anna smiled affectionately that she couldn't believe that I had already turned 10 and 10. There are a lot of long livers here. There are even some who are already over 100 years old. Do you know why we are so tenacious? The girl shook her head. "No, I don't know." Anna was satisfied with the effect. "The air here is special, clean. And there are mushrooms and berries. They also have incredible power. For example, I go to the forest myself. I can walk all day long. And I don't feel tired." Jenna was curious about the unusual life of the Karelian villagers, who ate little meat, but always had fish and tea on the table. Anna cooked according to her secret recipe. She brewed herbs and added pine needles to them. Such a drink would protect her granddaughter from any illness, although her grandmother's tea was bitter. Jenna drank it by force. She really wanted to live to the same age as Aunt Wendy. One day, Jenna obeyed her grandmother's and decided to walk along the edge of the forest. The girl was followed by a dog named Rex, to whom the grandmother did not forgive any pranks. As soon as the girl got into the forest, in front of her ran a trampled path. Jenna cheerfully thought in vain. "My grandmother's used to scare me. I'll walk a little bit along the path, and then I'll go back along it." Jenna walked no more than 100 meters, as suddenly to the left of the path, she saw a huge glade of flowers. Forgetting about everything in the world, the girl began to collect a bouquet for grandmothers. Then she came across a glade of blueberries and ate enough berries. Jenna forgot about time and went far away from the path. Dusk began to descend slowly on the forest, and the girl said chillingly, "The horror." She darted between the tall trees, trying to find that life-saving path that would bring her back to the village. But she never found it. The sun was already below the horizon, and Jenna began to hear terrible sounds. She crouched down on the hill and cried in despair. "How stupid of me. I didn't listen to Grandma Anya. Now the wolves will soon come here and eat me out of fear." I said this version out loud, and immediately a suspicious noise was heard in the bushes. Jenna ran away, but into the clearing ran out. Satisfied, Rex looked at the girl with his intelligent eyes, and in them she read reproaches of judgment. Then Rex barked and ran forward. Jenna hurried after the dog. If the girl lagged behind, Rex stopped and waited patiently for her. So, with the help of the counselor and the girl returned to the village. It was already quite dark, and near the courtyard of Anna crowded people. Uncle Peter, who came in the morning, handed out orders to divide into 4 groups to speed up the search. We walk in a solid line of streetlights. Keep them on. The man did not have time to give the order before the end when a woman's scream was heard. Stand down. We got our girl Rex. She's being led. Both grandmothers ran out of the crowd at the same time. Jenna, what are you doing to us? You almost drove your grandmothers to their graves. The women scolded the girl, not forgetting to kiss her. When the moment was right, Jenna handed them the bouquet of flowers she had picked so diligently in the woods. This gesture finally melted the hearts of the elderly ladies, and they wept. What a good granddaughter we have growing up, thought of the grandmothers. From both sides again sprinkled kisses. Apparently, it's a touching ceremony. Rex didn't like the reunion, and he raised his voice. They're freaking out. Don't worry, Rex. No one's forgotten about you. You're our hero. The loyal dog was rewarded for his selfless act with a sugar bone. Then all evening, Anna told Jenna local legends about giants turned to stone and the masters of the forest. The main thing in our forests is the wolf and the bear, but these animals are not supposed to be called by their proper names. Especially in the summer, they can get angry for such an attitude. The girl listened to the ancient tales with her mouth wide open. And how should they be called? What if I go to the forest again and meet a wolf? Anna shook her head. It is better for you not to meet one-on-one with this beast, but if you do, call its tail a stick. Jenna laughed at Anna. But there are no such names. It's you there in the middle zone does not happen. But we call wolves that. Anna. Then every night before going to bed, she told the girl scary tales that made her veins bleed from the rear. In the child's memory, these stories crashed for a long time, but over the years they were almost forgotten. And only now, when Jenna's body began, and from the inside sharpened terrible disease, she again remembered the wicked witch. All this and the moose that turns into a human during the day. Andrew didn't show up until the end of the week. Although Jenna was offended by his long absence, she didn't make a scene in front of her neighbor. But when Maria tactfully came out, the young woman could not help her reproach. Andrew, couldn't you have come sooner? I've been here all week on my own. I don't even have a penny for necessary expenses. The man snapped at her. If you didn't come, then you couldn't. There's nothing wrong with you. You even started up. The treatment must be good for you. Jenna wouldn't tell her husband how hard she'd been through her second round of chemo. That's fine. But the doctor said you need to eat more nutrition now. You should eat more fruit and drink juices. Maybe I should get you a cross-litter one too. Andrew said those words with a sneer. And Jenna was silent. For about half an hour, her husband told about his successes at work and about a new profitable partnership. The woman silently listened and accordingly nodded her head, telling all the news about herself. The man thought that it was enough for one visit. He could have, but he hit me in the forehead. I'm out of here. I'm off. I can't promise to be back tomorrow. But as soon as I get a free moment, I'll be sure to visit you. Andrew, leave me some money. There's a store here. I'll buy what I need. There was a series of grumbles and sighs, but the man took out his purse and counted out a few bills. I think you'll have enough for the first time. The phrase was said in an affirmative tone, and the woman nodded her head again. Barely had the door closed behind Andrew. Tears spontaneously sprang from his eyes. Back in the room, Maria got worried. Jenna, are you sick? Should I call a nurse? Did the woman wave her arms? No. I'm fine. I guess the treatment must have heightened my sense of self-pity. I don't think that's the reason. I'm not in the habit of intruding on other people's lives. But your husband hasn't been very nice to you. Jenna took a sip. He's like that now. He used to be kind and helpful. And what kept him from being that way? My illness. Maria was shocked by this confession. Jenna, wait, but it shouldn't be like this. Any normal person, especially a husband, should show mercy. The support of loved ones can work wonders. I know this from my own experience. My son and daughter-in-law did not leave me at first, even spent the night in the ward. Only thanks to them I got out of that, Jenna. and now my desire to live has doubled. After all, I will soon have a granddaughter or granddaughter. It's such a powerful incentive. Jenna looked with envy at the spiritualized face of this already not young woman. She thought bitterly and painfully about the fact that she had no one left to care for her. Wendy's grandmother had passed away 15 years ago. Her parents died in a plane crash. They had been saving up money for a vacation for several years and died. They were gone in March, and in January, Jenna and Andrew had a big wedding. The parents of the newlyweds wanted to surprise the whole village and organized a grand celebration. At their insistence, after the couple was married in the registry office, they went to the temple, where they were married by a priest according to all church canons. The bride was then overwhelmed with the brightest feelings, and she sincerely believed that now their hearts are united for eternity. After the sacrament of marriage, Andrew asked Jenna with a chuckle, "It is really ready to be with me both in sorrow and in joy?" The girl answered without hesitation, "Of course. And aren't you ready?" The groom turned everything into a joke. "Let's say I am ready to rejoice with you, but I'm not so sure about the sorrow." Jenna was unpleasant to hear such statements only a few minutes after the ceremony. She wanted to say something harsh to Andrew, but he beat her to it. "And I can already see that you are offended. Jenna, you are so touching. You're incredibly beautiful in the moment." Jenna was even more offended. There was a moment when she was ready to turn around and leave, but her newly married husband grabbed her arm. "No puffing and puffing like a steam engine. People look at us, they will say that we did not have time to sign and already quarreled, so it doesn't happen. Andrew, you have to think before you speak. You're the one who's so upset about the grief. Well, just think about it, because there are different cases in life, and not everyone is ready to accept the problems of another person, even if it's a wife or parents." Andrew avoided a direct answer. "Jenna, please don't escalate the situation now. The guests are waiting for the holiday, and let's not deprive them of joy. You and I have hundreds of days and nights ahead of us to talk things over." The happy man then picked Jenna up in his arms and carried her to the restaurant where the event was to take place. For 3 days, the guests partied at the wedding, and that unpleasant conversation lost its former poignancy. Then the first family problems appeared, and they had to be urgently solved. It was the bride's parents who provided substantial help to the newlyweds. When Mike found out that his daughter and son-in-law were going to rent a place, he even took offense. "It's like you're not family. Why wander around in other people's corners? And pay for it. Live. Our apartment is big enough for everyone. And when the grandchildren come, my mother and I will take care of them." But these optimistic plans were not destined to come true. A little more than a month passed, and there was a catastrophe, which took the lives of 2 people closest to Jenna. In those difficult days for the young woman, Andrew did not allow his wife to dissolve in grief. The man even took another vacation from her to be by her side. "Jenna, you have to get over it. Life goes on, and you have to live at least for the sake of your parents to be calm there, in heaven." Her husband's persuasions worked, and the young woman began to revive little by little. She was grateful to her husband for not abandoning her and supporting her in her time of need. Days passed, and this gratitude gradually transformed into submission. First, Andrew told his wife to change her place of work. "Jenna, I have the latest information at the mill. Very soon there will be a new shop, and they promise a very high salary. Since I am not the last person at the plant, I have the opportunity to arrange a money place for my own wife." This news did not please Jenna. "Andrew, aren't you excited? I've heard about this shop. It's not going to be good. You know you don't get high wages for nothing. They pay big bonuses for hazardous working conditions. That's exactly the kind of risky place the new shop will be. If you follow the safety rules, you won't be in any danger." The young woman didn't like her husband's insistence on putting her in a hazardous workplace. "Andrew, why didn't you take the initiative yourself? Don't you get it? My higher education does not allow me to become a simple handyman, and I only graduated from high school. That's why I'm destined to take a place in the ranks of laborers." The man didn't feel his wife's question was a trick. Sort of. Jenna, you and me, we've been dreaming of a big apartment. We need money for that. That's the first time I've ever heard you say that. I mean, I'm doing pretty good in this apartment. Besides, I think we should start thinking about having a baby. After all, we've been married almost 3 years. Andrew knew well that his wife could not resist tenderness. He paddled over to her and began to whisper, "If you don't want to, don't go to the new shop. It's not like I'm forcing you. And in the old apartment, we can still live quite well. But think how uncomfortable it will be for our children. After all, you and I will have at least 3. Ivansov." Jenna took the bait immediately. "Dear husband, are you sure we'll have boys? Maybe I'm going to give you 3 princesses." Soon Jenna moved to work in the new shop, and her Andrew took the chair of the first deputy director of the company. A little more time passed, and the couple sold the old apartment. Jenna did not know that her husband did not intend to live in Jubilee in the future. Andrew informed his wife about his intention to buy housing in the city immediately after the sale of the parental living space. The woman was shocked. "Why didn't you warn me? What am I supposed to do now? How am I going to get to work?" The man listened to his wife and smiled. "Jenna, why are you making an elephant out of a fly? From the city to the village is only 20 kilometers, and the bus runs regularly. That's one. And what's your surprise number 2? Andrew deliberately paused to make the effect more vivid. "Number 2. I think you'll be able to settle down in the city after the housewarming party. Indeed, why jeopardize your health if you can find a quiet job? And you'll help. You got me on that one too. Jenna, come sit next to me. I'll tell you all the trade secrets." The young woman complied with her husband's request. "I'm listening to you very carefully. We have significant events ahead of us. Our factory and several other enterprises will soon be united into a single network. It's a kind of concern in our country. It's one of the first experiments." Jenna begged Andrew, "Can we skip these details? Tell me, what fate have you prepared for your wife?" "All right. Then it's easier now. In short, we plan to open a store in the near future, and I'll get you a job in this outlet. True, the salary will be half as much, but at least the work is harmless close to home. What do you think of my decision?" Jenna was touched by her husband's concern. She kissed Andrew and whispered thank you. "I really like your decision." The man gave his wife an answering kiss. "Now we can think about procreation. Or we may not be able to produce 3 hares in the new apartment. They will have room to run wild." The happy woman then did not pay attention to the fact that her husband had registered a new apartment. She thought it was normal that all the finances in the family were somehow unnoticeably taken over by Andrew. The husband was well aware of the schedule of advances and received, and these days he waited for his wife in the hallway. So Jenna deposited in our piggy bank all the coins and rubrics, and the woman willingly gave her husband all her hard-earned money. Only once she dared to disobey her spouse, and on the way home went to a department store to buy herself some lingerie. When Andrew was short of the amount due, he went green with anger. "Jenna is missing here. I signed the statements, and I know how much you're supposed to get." The woman tossed carelessly. "Andrew, this is too much. I went to the store, bought what I needed. Do I really need to ask your permission to buy underwear? Or are you gonna buy me my own lingerie and hygiene products?" The man wasn't the least bit embarrassed. "If I have to, I'll go shopping myself." At some point, Jenna realized that her husband considered her an appendage. For a while she tried to object, but Andrew paid no attention to her outbursts. Then the feeling of despair was replaced by apathy. But Jenna tried to ignore the sudden deterioration of her health. The medical staff became alarmed when the woman was undergoing a medical commission for employment. The therapist looked at her strangely and said, "Jenna, you need to urgently retest and undergo a more detailed examination." She smiled at the doctor. "Okay, I'll do all that. What do you say?" The doctor told her to come back in 3 days. Jenna was in high spirits when she knocked on the door of the already familiar doctor's office, trying not to look her in the eye. "Jenna, My worst suspicions have been realized. You need to see a hematologist right away. I'm anemic again. You've had this problem before. Yes. When I was a kid, I drank iron and ate hematomas all the time. My mom used to buy those candy bars at the drugstore. The doctor looked at Jenna again with the same strange look. Are you anemic? Unfortunately, it's much worse than that. I'm not gonna lie to you. If the diagnosis is confirmed, there will be a long treatment. A smile seemed to be glued to the woman's face. She took the referral and thanked the doctor. In the hallway, Jenna sat down on the couch and read the short note in illegible handwriting. Although she had no understanding of medicine at all without labor, she realized that it was about a qualitative blood disorder. She returned home in a state of utter devastation. Andrew cheerfully asked, "But what did they tell you?" Through the pause. Nothing good. The woman handed her husband a referral for hospitalization. For about 5 minutes he studied the doctor's conclusion, and then with her optimistically, said, "Doctors often make mistakes, so I see no reason for despondency. Lie down for a week, take some pills, and everything will be back to normal." But Jenna had her first round of chemo, then she was given a second round, and Andrew's optimism began to wane, and it was replaced by irritation. One day, the man blamed his wife without a shadow of embarrassment for her illness. "It's your own fault, Jenna, for the slightest trifle. You take everything to heart." The woman looked at her husband with surprise. "And you didn't think that the cause of my illness is my work in the new shop? By the way, you're the one who sent me there for the big bucks." Things were getting heated. Men were angry. "But sex with your wife? You're not a little girl. You could have said no. And anyway, when I married you, I didn't think I'd have to run around the hospital with handbags. If I understood you correctly, Andrew, you also reproached me that in my illness he carelessly threw. Understand as you wish." All inside the unhappy woman shuddered. Jenna did not want to believe that she had lived 5 years with such a monster. In the memory surfaced moments of their life together, which should have alerted her even earlier, but she did not attach importance to them. Only now she realized the true meaning of that common phrase: to be there for each other in both sorrow and joy. Jenna realized that Andrew did not want to share her misfortune. He only wanted the joys. Andrew, energetic gait, walked down the long corridor of the medical facility. The man wrinkled his nose unhappily, covering his nose with a handkerchief. He was irritated by the pungent hospital odors. Near the door, with the sign of the head of the department, he stopped and knocked. After approvingly, "You enter." A man opened the door. "I'm Jenna's husband. The nurse told me you wanted to talk to me." An elderly man in a surgical suit looked up from his papers. Yes, sir. I've been wanting to talk to you for a long time. Please sit down." "It's all right. I can stand." The doctor looked at the visitor with a scrutinizing gaze. "Are you in a hurry?" Andrew felt uncomfortable and a little hungry. "But I can stay longer if the business requires it." The doctor shook his head regretfully. "If you classify your wife's health as an everyday matter, then you can put it that way, according to the terminology you have chosen. Jenna is not doing very well, to put it mildly, or rather very badly. So you'd better sit down. I'll try not to take up too much of your time. You have a lot of time." Andrew slowly lowered himself into the chair. "What's so serious? You don't come in here for nothing. In this particular case, your wife, the situation is extremely troubling. 2 previous courses of chemotherapy did not give the expected result. The disease is progressing. I have a disappointing prognosis for you." Andrew sensed the note and loosened the knot of his tie. "Are you saying that my wife will die?" The superintendent suddenly laughed. "We all die sometime. Unfortunately, that's the law of nature. The whole point of this law is that some people manage to use up all their allotted time limit, while others pass away soon after the start. And my wife falls into that second category. If I understand you correctly." "That's correct. The woman is only 26 years old. That's her prime. She should be having babies and making you happy. We've tried twice to stop this process, but so far we've had no success. That's why we made a collegial decision to change the treatment regimen. I will not hide from you this method is more rigid and therefore fraught with the development of side effects. Andrew interrupted Cheekbones, and in what form these side effects will be expressed. The doctor hummed again. Of the most striking is partial baldness, that is, baldness. Also often in such patients there is a sharp weight loss, may appear and other complications, but with a favorable course of all these changes will be temporary. Andrew, holding his breath, asked. Otherwise, the doctor sharply unfolded his hands. Alas, the organism of each person is individual, and it is impossible to predict in advance how successful the treatment will be. Therefore, we can only hope for a positive outcome, but no doctor can give any guarantees. Andrew looked at the doctor with all his eyes, and his imagination was already drawing terrible pictures of the future. These fantasies were so realistic that he did not restrain himself from screaming. It seems to me that you are deliberately mocking me. After all, there are means to avoid the worst-case scenario. There can't be no worst-case scenario. There must be something you can do. The doctor calmly replied, I understand how you feel, but don't overreact. And as for whether there is anything that can be done to save your wife, I will say that such opportunities exist. Our Israeli colleagues have a wealth of experience in hematology. This is the name of the field dealing with the treatment of diseases of the blood organs, creation. Andrew impatiently interrupted the superintendent. I'm not that dormant. I understand medical terminology. I would not like to learn more about such treatment. I think there's no need to delve into the methodology itself. But the results are impressive. Up to 70% survival rate is a very solid figure. So 100% recovery is not expected. And how much would a course of such treatment cost? The head of the department said the amount, and Andrew felt the hair on the top of his head stirring. Just in case, he asked again how much. Keeping a nonchalant look, the doctor repeated the visitor's answer. For a while he was in a state of stupor. He did not even blink and was afraid to move in his chair. When the stupor subsided, Andrew jumped up. Thank you for the useful information, but we don't have that kind of money. We could buy an apartment or a car with that kind of money. To save the people closest to you, many people sacrifice comfort and sell their last home. Think about it. It seems astronomical at first, but if you put everything in its place, you can always find a way out of a difficult situation. Andrew waved his head several times. Doctor, do you have any idea what you're talking about? If I didn't, I wouldn't have even mentioned this one possibility to save your wife. In fact, if I were in that kind of trouble, I wouldn't hesitate to take off my shirt and sell everything. I have nothing more to say to you. The conversation with the head of the ward made such a strong impression on Andrew that he forgot to look in his wife's room. He remembered this omission as he raced at top speed toward the house, clutching or wincing his fingers. He kept saying, I must think things over calmly. Familiar with the home environment, the man was immediately relieved. He poured into a glass of white wine and drank the entire portion in a volley. This drink worked instantly, and Andrew felt relief. He drank another glass of wine to consolidate the result. My thoughts gradually began to come to order, and my wife's illness receded into the background. If I sold the car and the apartment, I wouldn't have enough to pay for Jenna's treatment. And then there was no guarantee that she would fully recover to live the rest of her life in poverty with a sick wife. It's not a pleasant prospect for me. I'm not 30 yet. That means that all the most interesting things are ahead of me. And after all, there are other women besides Jenna, like Camille. Andrew caught himself that he began to think about this nice girl more and more often. And he didn't just think of Camille, he imagined her in Jenna's place. Camille had come into his life recently. This girl was the adopted daughter of William, with whom Andrew had a strong business relationship, although the famous businessman was almost twice his age. This age difference was not felt. William trusted the young deputy completely and even once admitted that he wanted to buy out the concern completely. Andrew, you are the only one I can trust with my deepest dream. I know that you will not let me down and our friendship will continue in the future, but I want to see you not only as a friend and companion, but something more. The young man understood what the businessman was implying, but pretended to be a fool. William, you are like a businessman father to me, he laughed. I wish I had a son like that, but I've been unlucky in that respect. Of course, there are alternative ways of strengthening family ties, but as I know, you are already legally married. Andrew's silly giggle. Yeah, well, we all make mistakes when we're young. I got married in a hurry, too, but it's a mistake that can always be corrected. William looked at his young friend for a long time, then said for the first time, I heard that marriage is a misunderstanding. But I like your approach to life. I respect determined people. And I am ready to applaud you too. Andrew took the entrepreneur's last words as a call to action and began to hatch plans to divorce Jenna. But there was one thing stopping him, and it was not his wife's illness. The man really did not want to lose everything he had gained at his apartment, car, and other pleasant privileges. Andrew well understood that if he left Jenna in such a critical situation, at one point his reputation would collapse, and this would negatively affect his career. Then William himself would be the first to point him out the door. Marriage to his adopted daughter would be forgotten forever. We'd have to come up with something that wouldn't let a mosquito in. And so it was found. Andrew was surprised at first that it was possible to resolve a difficult situation so quickly and practically without losses. The man did not notice how the previously favorite woman suddenly turned into a problem for him, which he wanted to get rid of by any means. As iron must be forged before it gets cold, Andrew decided to visit his wife first. When he arrived, Jenna cheerfully exclaimed, Andrew, you've been gone so long. You're in trouble. A sharp needle pricked him, and he was suddenly pricked with shame. But that feeling was quickly hidden by the pressure of an inner voice. Stop embarrassing yourself like a young lady. You're doing the right thing, because in this crazy world, the strongest man wins. The truth is always on the side of the strongest. Of course, he didn't say those words out loud. He crouched down next to his wife and began stroking her worsted hand affectionately. The husband questioned the sick woman about business. Jenna laughed. Andrew, what business can a hematology patient have? Departments. I've been lying here for over a month from constant surveillance. My hair's starting to fall out. I'm so anxious to go home. The man scrutinized the woman's agitated face and realized with horror that there was almost nothing left of that former cheerful Jenna. On his wife's face appeared a thin grid of wrinkles, and her eyes glistened with feverish fire. Only a pathetic semblance was left of her luxurious coiffure, and her hair was rotten and resembled a wig in appearance. In addition to all of the above changes, Jenna had lost a great deal of weight. She could hardly keep her balance, and while walking she held on to the walls or the back of the bed with her hand. She spoke little because she quickly tired and began to choke. There was a moment when Andrew thought his wife smelled the odor of earth. The sensation was so unpleasant that it made him shudder. Jenna immediately asked Andrew anxiously, "What's wrong?" He smiled through the force and drew his wife to him. "I'm fine. It's just that there's a draft in your room. I don't want you to catch a cold on top of all your other problems. It's coming from the hallway, but it's a little thing I've gotten used to. Sorry I forgot to thank you for the private room. It's a little boring, but there's no one to mess with your head. Jenna, I have another piece of encouraging news to tell you. I spoke to your doctor recently, and he recommended a clinic in Israel." The woman froze. She looked at her husband with horror for 2 minutes, and then quietly, even pitifully said, "Andrew, but you and I do not have such money, and I've almost found the right amount. I was promised to subsidize my partner and colleague William. That's the businessman you met 2 years ago, before my illness. He is." Andrew lied inspirationally. Jenna looked at him with a devoted gaze. Suddenly, she leaned her head on her husband's shoulder and cried softly, childishly, "Andrew, honey, you have no idea what you have done for me today." The man patted the woman on the shoulder. "Darling, don't exaggerate. There's nothing special about what I did. The woman whispered fervently. If a man doesn't realize it until he faces it himself, you gave me a ray of hope today. I was getting desperate. I started counting the days. Do you realize what it's come to? He stroked her back, telling her everything's gonna be all right. Your doctor said that more than half of patients fully recover after treatment in Israel, and you will definitely get better too. Jenna calmed down a little and looked into her husband's eyes with the same look. Andrew, and when are we going? Very soon we are good. I'll talk to your doctor some more, and we need to call the clinic. It'll take at most a week. Will you go to Robert's right now? Of course I am. After all, every day you rest, and tomorrow I will come again and tell you everything. Andrew walked his wife to the bed and kissed her goodbye. At the door, he paused for a moment. Jenna, everything will be fine. Don't despair. After her husband left, the woman fell asleep with a smile on her lips. For the first time in her long months of illness, she was in high spirits. She trusted her husband and mentally repeated everything would be all right. Although Andrew's plans did not include a second visit to the head of the department, he decided to make amends, his wife's condition and health. The doctor fixed his sharp gaze on the visitor's face. Unfortunately, I have nothing to report. No positive dynamics. The doctor made an expressive pause. I'm afraid that your wife will not live more than 6 months. That's the maximum. So I suggest you hurry up and go to the Israeli clinic. All right, doctor, I'll do my best, as Robert showed with all his appearance that the conversation was over. The man politely bowed out. At home, Andrew began to polish his plan, in which Jenna was to play the main role. For several days, the man worked out a scheme of disappearance of the woman from the clinic and tried to take into account even insignificant at first glance trifles when everything was scheduled literally by minutes. He went to the hospital, taking with him in winter clothes of the spouse. The man left his car 2 blocks from the hospital, then walked to the facility. He planned his route so that he could be seen by as many people as possible. At the sight of the long-awaited visitor, the sick woman jumped out of bed and began to fix her hair. With excitement, her face laughed sharply and only her eyes burned with that frightening glint that had struck the man last time. Jenna approached her husband and, in a half-whisper, informed Andrew, I did everything you told me to do, but Robert was very surprised when I asked about the Israeli clinic. That's right. Jenna, yesterday, we still haven't reached a consensus. This morning we called and dotted all the I's. The man looked at his watch defiantly and shook his head. So you and I are running out of time. We have a plane to Tel Aviv in 2.5 hours, and we haven't even had time to go home. So you and I will bypass the formalities that are required in such cases in order to catch the flight. Give me your things. You go down the back stairs. Try not to be seen by the staff. You've got something warm to wear, and you've got Andrew. Although the ward doesn't allow woolen clothes, I hid my old carton very good under the mattress. In it, you run to the alley that adjoins the hospital grounds. All your clothes are in my car. Will you have time to change on the way? Andrew spoke quickly and assertively, so that his wife wouldn't have time to realize it. Jenna, you'll get there without help. You realize we shouldn't go in together. They'll start asking you where you're going. And you and I are definitely not gonna make it. We already have appointments at the best clinics, and we can't be late. Andrew, I'll do it. What did you say? I managed to get a key to the back door. I took it off the nurse's binder. They were running around outside. The man's a ringing smacker, but he's still giving his wife a peck on the cheek. Let's not take too long. He leisurely left the ward and headed for the duty nurse's post. Here's some tea for you girls. A beautiful box of chocolates brought the medical staff. Delight. Oh, a real squirrel with nuts. You can't get candy like that nowadays. This is a special gift for the beautiful angels in white coats. Thank you. The girls thanked Andrew with one voice, and without waiting for him to leave, ran to the back room to put the kettle on. The man hurried to the elevator. He got out and through the center doors hurried to the alley where his car was parked. Jenna appeared 5 minutes later. She was breathing noisily, indicating that even this short trip had been very difficult for her. "I hope I'm not too late." "Well done, you did a great job. There's a fur coat, warm boots, and other civilized clothes. I'm taking off all my hospital clothes and putting them in a bag. I'll return the property to the ward later." Jenna did not pay attention to the road. The most important thing for her now was to follow all her husband's instructions clearly. But still she timidly asked Andrew, "We'll stop for a snack on the way, because I was left without a wife today." The man didn't even turn around. "You shouldn't have. We should have eaten. Unfortunately, we don't have much time, but we can get something at the airport. You get some rest. You can even Nokia for half an hour." The woman was surprised. Then the airport is no more than 10 minutes away. The main highway has been closed for repairs. We'll have to take the county road. Repairs in winter, you'd be surprised. In our country, everything impossible becomes possible. The car rolled smoothly along the road, and Jenna quickly fell asleep, but in her mind the timekeeping was counting seconds and minutes. At some point, the woman awakened abruptly and asked Andrew with concern in her voice, "Has it been more than half an hour, or am I imagining it?" "You're imagining it. We'll be there soon. Don't worry." But the answer of her husband did not calm the woman, because in his voice she caught unpleasant notes. Fear began to slowly envelop her in a black veil, and her body began to shake convulsively. Jenna nestled against the window, but the panes were covered with a thin crust of ice. The woman breathed on the glass, and with consternation, exclaimed to Andrew, "Where are we going?" "This is not the road to the airport. There are forests all around." The man answered nothing, but sharply increased speed. Jenna clutched the back of the driver's seat with her hands. "Andrew, why are you silent? What are you up to?" Without turning around, he yelled, "Get your hands off me. Not only are you standing on the edge of the grave, but you want to drag me down with you." A terrible realization flashed through the woman's mind. "Andrew, you can't do this to me. I trusted you. You promised you'd take me to the clinic." He grinned gloatingly, assuming I'd kept my promise. "This is your clinic. Here you will fully recover your health. I don't need a sick wife. I'm a healthy man, and I want to see the same healthy woman next to me." The car braked sharply. A man jumped out on the road and rushed to the back door. "Get out. This is your stop." The woman struggled, but the odds were stacked against her. "Andrew, you and your wife out of the car." And she dragged you into the woods. "I'm sorry, Jenna, but it's better for both of us. And you suffer, and I don't have to do the heavy lifting." Andrew pulled his burden to a small clearing, hiding between the pines, and tossed Jenna carelessly into the snow. Andrew felt an extraordinary exhilaration. His whole being exulted, and the inner voice cheerfully said, "You're good, Andrew. You got rid of unnecessary ballast." The man ran to his car, drowning knee-deep in snow. He did not look back once, for he was afraid that the sight of his helpless wife would awaken pity in his heart. At that moment, he did not think that he had committed a terrible sin for which he would one day have to pay. Despite the fact that the plan had been checked to the last detail, Andrew did not remember the place where he had left his wife, so he was surprised that the return trip took several hours. "How far I've traveled." At first, the man regretted that it hadn't occurred to him to check the route with the map, but later he thought it was even better. "If I had the urge to go back, I wouldn't have found the woods where I'd left Jenna." As soon as he entered the city, he stopped at the first dumpster and dumped the rest of his wife's things in the tank. That's it. Now everything was in order. Getting to the apartment, Andrew drank half a glass of strong drink. It helped the man to calm down. He ate a hearty dinner and turned on the TV to distract himself from troubling thoughts. Well-behaved man went to work in the morning. Toward noon, William himself came to his office. William gave Andrew a fatherly hug. Said my friend with a look of reproach, "You disappeared from my sight so suddenly yesterday that I was worried. Did something happen to you?" The businessman's small eyes took in the young man's face, but he held that look. "You know my wife is in the hospital. I've been visiting her." Yes, I'm aware of that circumstance. I'm very sorry for your loss. I hope our medical staff can help her." "I'd like to hope so too. But alas, my wife's condition worsens every day. Even the most advanced treatments are failing. Yesterday I spoke to the attending physician, and he told me frankly that at best she could survive for 6 months." William averted his eyes, but a smile flashed across his face. But William quickly pulled himself together, and a look of compassion came over his face. "It's very hard to watch a loved one suffer. I too have suffered the same fate. My mother died of cancer. But you, Andrew, do not despair. You are still a young man, and you have the best ahead of you." Andrew thanked his older comrade for his support, and William hurried off. He would have been happy to stay longer, but it's business. "Andrew, you don't wallow in your grief. It's dangerous. Come and see us this evening for an after-hours chat. I hope you haven't forgotten my address." The young man felt awkward, but it quickly passed, and he confidently replied, "I have a very good visual memory. I will definitely come to see you." And barely had the door closed behind William when the phone rang. Andrew thought that the chief or the chief accountant was looking for him, but from the receiver came a husky male voice. "Andrew, it's you from the hospital." His heart jumped frantically in the man's chest, but he calmly answered, "Yes, I'm listening to you, Robert. Is something wrong?" "I'm not sure yet. That's why I'm calling you. The thing is, Jenna disappeared, and we thought she was home. After all, you visited her last night." Andrew screamed. "Disappeared how? Doctor, you must have thought to play a joke on me. What are you doing? What kind of a joke? This is a first for us. I'm not interested in how many cases like this have happened in your hospital. I want to know where my wife is. She's in no condition to run away. And you know that very well." Andrew yelled into the phone, and the head of the department did not even try to justify his staff, who noticed the disappearance of the patient only in the morning. And also when developing his plan, Andrew took this moment into account and prepared well for it. Immediately after the superintendent's call, he went to the hospital, where police officers were already interviewing the staff and patients. The man so firmly entered the role of an indignant husband that he even began to express his dissatisfaction with the law enforcement representative. "Can you please explain to me how this could have happened? I left at 7 p.m. and Jenna," meaning my wife, was in bed at that point. "One investigator was hurriedly recording my husband's statement, and the other was trying to calm him down. I understand you perfectly well, but if you can, tell me more about last night." Andrew concentrated frowned. He described his last visit in chronological order. At the end of his narrative, he let out a stingy male tear. "Find my wife. A terminally ill woman could not disappear without a trace. She could hardly move around the ward. I don't buy the escape theory. They're not the ones hiding something." The angry man pointed his finger at the ward staff, frozen in a daze. The senior operative promised, "Our officers have already started the search. Will we keep you informed? Leave us your cell phones." Andrew held out a notebook and a sheet of paper. "Here's a home office phone number. Call me any time of day or night. Please find my wife. She and I were supposed to go to an Israeli clinic the other day." Robert gave him a cursory glance, but Andrew had clearly worked out that he had indeed made an arrangement with a foreign clinic. He thought with satisfaction, "Check all you want. I've covered everywhere I can." Andrew had completely ruled out the possibility that Jenna would suddenly be found alive and unharmed. After all, the thermometer had dropped below 20 degrees last night. The man was sure that the terminally ill woman froze in the same clearing where he left her. After returning home, Andrew changed his clothes and, as if nothing had happened, went to visit William. He tried to be sad, which did not prevent him from actively grooming the nickname. William watched the young couple all evening, and as the guest hurried home, he gave him the same fatherly hug. "Hold on, Andrew. And do you know that the doors of our house are always open to you? When the door closed behind the guest, William said to his wife, a very dodgy lad, I think this is the most successful party for our knee. The businessman's wife also liked Andrew, but even if she had a negative impression of him, she would not dare to say it out loud. In Camille's house, only William decided everything and everyone. Jenna. She didn't want to believe that everything was happening to her. When her husband had left her for dead in the winter woods near the pine trees, she had tried to stop him with a plea for help. But the words stuck in her throat. The woman wanted to get up, but immediately fell into the snow. She saw Andrew running away from the scene of his crime. The world collapsed before the eyes of the unfortunate woman. From the excitement, Jenna briefly lost consciousness. When the woman regained the ability to assess the situation sensibly, she heard the snow creaking somewhere not far away. It sounded very much like the footsteps of a man, only fainter. For some reason, Anna's advice came to her mind, and Jenna grabbed a nearby thick branch. With great difficulty, the woman stood up and leaned on this aid. The creaking of snow could be heard very close by, and it first doubled, then settled. The woman almost screamed with horror. Seeing in 20 meters from herself burning lights, she felt her body instantly covered with sticky. Then frozen lips whispered soundlessly, Wolves. How many of them are there? Mommy, Daddy, help me, Jenna. Suddenly, a recent dream came to mind, which Maria had easily deciphered. It was indeed a dream. Jenna could no longer hear her voice and was about to panic. But at this critical moment from the distant past, again surfaced the image of Anna Davidovna. If your granddaughter happens to meet a wolf, never look into his eyes. This beast will recognize by his eyes that a person is afraid of him, and then there's a good chance he'll attack first. 10-year-old Jenna then cheerfully replied to her grandmother, I run so fast that no wolf can catch up with me. I'm always first in school in competitions. I run to the finish line. Grandma shook her head. It's different in life. Fear paralyzes a person, but even a well-prepared athlete is unlikely to be able to compete with the forest beast, because in just half an hour, an adult wolf is able to overcome a distance of 10 kilometers. This is equivalent to the result of a human riding a bicycle. Jenna then, to the depths of consciousness, struck by this information, and her optimism quickly faded. Grandma Anna, then it turns out that there is no escape from wolves at all. Why not? If you behave correctly, that is, do not turn your back to the beast and do not provoke him. He will not attack. If the wolf is alone, it can be frightened. Jenna looked in the direction from which the deadly danger was coming and tried to count the burning lights. At the number 12, she lost count. In the inflamed brain flashed God, there is a whole pack of them, and a stick will hardly help me. Gathering her last strength, the woman shouted tales with a stick. I'm not afraid of you. Get out of here. The wolves looked at the woman with surprise, but they were not going to disperse, although there was almost no hope of rescue. But still, Jenna believed in a miracle. She noticed that her cry had made the predators uneasy. That gave her confidence, and she screamed again, but louder. What are you looking at me for? Get out of here. The wolves snarled, stepped back a little. Jenna made a third decisive attempt and screamed at the top of her lungs for help. Her call for help was louder than the predators. The wolves stomped around some more and ran away. Jenna covered her eyes for a few seconds, and her senses sharpened to the extreme. She heard the distant footsteps of the predators and breathed a sigh of relief. But immediately, very different footsteps were heard. Heavy and confident, the woman opened her eyes and saw a huge silhouette approaching her. In her head flashed Hubert. A black veil spread before her eyes, and she fell unconsciously on the snow. Jenna woke up from the pleasant warmth that caressingly touched her whole body. She didn't want to open her eyes because she was afraid of scaring away the warmth. A peacefulness came to her hearing. Snippets of firewood, and such familiar household sounds as the whistle of a boiling kettle and the clinking of dishes. She slowly covered her eyes and gaze. Immediately came across the wooden ceiling. A sigh of relief involuntarily escaped from her chest. just like in Anna's house. From the side of the headboard came a pleasant male baritone. "You've come to your senses." Jenna saw the face of a man about 35 years old above her. "You as beauties have slept for more than 24 hours. But that's not surprising, considering where and under what circumstances I found you." The woman tried to say something, but the man made a warning gesture. "The most important thing for you right now is rest. When you're a little stronger, you'll be sure to tell me everything. In the meantime, I'll entertain you, mysterious stranger, with conversation. Of course, if you do not mind this order." The woman smiled and whispered quietly, "I'm in favor of it." The man shook his head. "Oh, you've forgiven on top of that. Your voice is hoarse. But don't worry, you're in good hands. Allow me to introduce myself. David, by education, I am a doctor-surgeon, but at the moment I am forced, professional, downtime. In other words, while not working about the reason, until I will not spread, so as not to bore you with unnecessary details." The man disappeared briefly and soon reappeared with a mug, over which a fragrant smoke was rising. "So the first official part is over. Now let's move on to the practicalities. You should try to drink this potion. Helps you from almost any ailment. Let me help you into a comfortable position." David gently lifted the entourage and brought the mug to her lips. "Drink carefully in small dots." The women swallowed the slightly cotton wool hot liquid through force. "It tastes like a drink my grandma Anna liked to drink. She called it a tea of longevity, and she prepared it from some herbs and made sure to add its needles." The man looked at the guest with surprise. "Oh, you even spoke clearly. It means that our business will go further only with a plus sign. By the way, you have almost completely guessed the recipe of my bread brew. It was given to me by a guy. We served together." David took the mug from Jenna's hands and sat down next to Sobchak, on whom Jenna was lying. "Don't consider it immodesty on my part, but if I hadn't shown up in time at that clearing, you would have definitely become prey to a wolf pack. The predators have recently begun to raid our village on a regular basis. Apparently, they're having trouble finding food. They had a leader, such a hardy wolf cleaner. Our men tried to eliminate him and set traps. No results. Although I have a small farm, roosters and 2 hens are not dry. My neighbors gave me a divorce, but it's still a pity to lose this livestock." David threw wood into the stove and went back to the bed of the sick woman. "I've only recently settled here. The second winter. Pardon the tautology. I'm settling in a little. I've got a bird. And in the fall Jack came to me, a very nice dog from a far corner of a simple village hut. A powerful dog barking was heard." Jenna turned her head with difficulty and saw a huge shaggy dog. "Oh, does your Jack look like a Rex? That was my grandmother's dog's name, but that was a long time ago." The short monologue was given to the woman with great difficulty, and she lowered her head on the pillow. Apparently, the Munchkin liked the fact that the guest paid attention to his person to establish good relations as soon as possible. The dog licked Jenna's hand and settled down next to the chin. David remarked with satisfaction, "Such a smart dog surprises me every day. Last night he started running around the house and barking too. I thought he was doing his own thing, but Jack started tugging at my sheepskin coat, and I guessed he was calling me." Jenna looked at the coat rack where the said piece of hostess attire was hanging. The sheepskin coat was brown in color, so Jenna mistook her savior for a bear. Meanwhile, David continued to praise his 4-legged pet. "Jack has that kind of intuition. After all, from the house to the place where we found you is almost 2 kilometers. He ran like a seasoned sprinter, and with a single spurt he unleashed his voucher." Jack stretched out over the stone mat, showing off his powerful paws. Jenna mouthed only his nickname with a smile. "You didn't pick it well. He's too big for Jack." After the table, a pleasant snowy feeling spread over the woman's body, and she fell asleep again. For almost 2 weeks, Jenna did not get out of bed. The owner of the little hut did not leave her side. He kept her drunk with various real ones, repeating each time, "Since you refuse to eat, and will have to drink more. We did not save you to die of exhaustion, Jenna. David was hardly ever silent. He knew many interesting and instructive stories. You know, Jenna, I have always dreamed of continuing the dynasty of doctors. There are 4 generations of doctors in our family, so I was predestined at birth to become a military doctor. I don't want to bore you with a long narrative, but I have been to different places, and everywhere I learned something new. The woman asked with interest to prepare various potions. Did you also learn on such expeditions? David wondered. An interesting interpretation. I never thought that the work of a military surgeon could be called such a peaceful expedition term. There's something to it, though. And so, Jenna, have you hit the mark? Thanks to my varied life, I've mastered a dozen related specialties. Familiarized myself with the secrets of Tibetan medicine, mastered needle therapy. God, when did you have time for all this? Jenna, you have no idea what hidden abilities each person has. We use no more than 5 or at best 10% of all available resources in our lifetime, hence all the health problems. After all, it is proven that a person can heal himself, and even from incurable diseases. Holding her breath, Jenna waited for an answer. David looked at her and immediately understood everything. Do you have this kind of problem? I immediately did not like your pale and obvious equipment. But to ask about such things, especially a woman, is indecent, so I tried to temper my curiosity. Jenna told him her unhappy story. When David found out her husband's dastardly deeds, he wasn't even surprised. Unfortunately, human meanness is quite common, and in the last 10 years, it's become an epidemic. You were abandoned in a helpless state by your husband. I was betrayed by a comrade I rescued. The man threw off his shirt and turned his back to Jenna. See the blue scar under his right shoulder blade? Yes, David pulled his shirt back on. I don't want to flaunt my torso in front of you because it's not etiquette. But if you'd like, I can tell you the story of how I acquired the mark. Of course you can. It was a little over 3 years ago, during the famous events in the East. We were working in military field conditions. That is, intense. There was a wild lack of working hands, and our nurses had to assist doctors during the most complicated operations. And then I was lucky enough to be sent an assistant. I rejoiced wildly at this fact alone. When I saw Zach, a fellow student at the academy, I was doubly happy. No sooner had we expressed our delight at the unexpected encounter. The enemy started firing. I had already gotten used to this music, but Vasca was in extreme conditions for the first time. Anyway, while we were exchanging pleasantries, they whistled very close, and I already knew by the sound what kind of stuff was flying towards us. I knocked Zach down on the floor and fell on top of him. That's what hit me. If it hadn't been for the fortune teller, it would have ended sadly. Jenna looked at her savior with undisguised admiration. It turns out that you have already saved more than one life. What can you do? It's my job. And your friend, what about him? David laughed childishly. Not a scratch on Zach. But it soon turned out my friend had a rotten soul. He set me up big time. It was his doing. I was banned from practicing medicine for 5 years. To make a long story short, he screwed me over big time. More specifically, he slandered me. There was a trial and all the consequences. I don't want to remember those events. David's story hit Jenna so hard, she slipped into the first person. How did you handle it? What other choice did I have? You're right, you could have grabbed a drink, but that's the last thing you want to do. And then I had a desire to find that bastard. The woman asked in surprise. Why? Just to look him in the eye. I didn't want to tell you, but since we're being honest, I'll tell you. My friend not only deprived me of the opportunity to work in my specialty, he also stole my favorite woman from under my nose. We've been living in a common law relationship for almost 5 years. Never had time to formalize the relationship. She's a doctor too. I'm sorry, but if she had true love, she would have switched sides. You're right, Jenna. I've always come to that conclusion myself when I've been going over things in my head. You know, the hardest thing is fighting injustice alone. Everyone looks at you and laughs, They think you're stupid. Confession didn't come easy to David. It was as if he was ashamed of his past. And Jenna clearly felt it. To relieve hung in the air tension. The woman said with a smile, "We have the same blood as in the cartoon about Mowgli." That's a good point. So we both have things to do, like supporting each other. Of course, I'm not imposing. It's your choice. I'm in. I don't have much time left anyway. David didn't let her finish her sentence, so I'll never, ever hear you panic speak again. Do you understand me? Jenna whispered softly. Yeah, that's great. I have a friend working in Canada who is an excellent specialist. A little stronger, lower, let's go to him. Jenna intuitively felt that from that moment on she was starting a whole new life. Now the future no longer seemed so hopeless to her. As she fell asleep that night, she thought, if God gives me a year or two of happy life, I will be grateful to him for this favor. And the Almighty heard the sick woman's plea and gave her many years of life near the man she loved. Jenna was washing the window half-heartedly, humming a popular song. The apartment was still a mess. David had to maneuver between boxes to reach his wife. Jenna, I didn't realize you had vocal abilities. The woman looked away from her work for a few seconds. David, are you kidding me? When I was a kid, a bear stepped on both ears and stomped on them. If I sing at the top of my voice, the neighbors will think what happened. A disaster. The man laughed. It seems to me that you come by your virtues. On the contrary, I assess them very objectively. Help me. The woman gave her husband her hand and carefully climbed down from the windowsill. David kissed her tenderly. Jenna, you smell of spring, dear. That's the scent of window cleaner. Someone has to clean this apartment. Tony's been missing for days at a time. You've been in your department 24 hours a day too. And I'm the one who's got to pick up the slack. It's been 2 months since we moved in, and the apartment's like a train station. Jenna made a naked grimace, and David laughed. You know how to press your conscience, I promise. No, I swear I'll leave the furniture on the nail wall next weekend and do all the man's work. Okay, I'll take you at your word. And don't forget you made a vow. Jenna saw her husband off and wanted to get on with the job, but the urge to clean the windows was gone. She sat down on a stool, gathered tape from a pile of boxes. What do we have here? Here we have family heirlooms. They were hastily preparing to move to a new place, so they didn't have time to sign all the boxes. David didn't care about the process at all. Jenna, why the hell do we have to bring all this stuff with us if we can buy everything we need on the spot? This attitude towards the things that were dear to her heart even offended the woman. David, we are, as you put it, junk. We haven't chewed it in over 2 decades. And I'm superstitious. My grandmother told me that many things serve as banks, so they should be treasured. Such a reverent attitude to everyday objects, Jenna appeared after the miraculous healing. She often caught herself thinking that everything from the moment she met David began to carry a symbolic, if not sacred, meaning. Although the man himself had been deeply hurt by fate, he had given up personal comfort for her sake. David took the terminally ill woman to an acquaintance in Canada. Jenna there underwent a full examination and for the first time heard from the same doctor encouraging conclusions. It's not that bad. Our clinic has developed a new method, but it has not yet found widespread use. If you ladies agree, then we will try the effectiveness of this method. Jenna agreed without hesitation. Doctor, I have no choice. If there's even one chance, I have to take it. Already after 2 weeks, David's friend Vovka noticed with satisfaction that my method was working. Look at the tests of your wife. Jenna looked at her benefactor with surprise, but he did not even wiggle an eyebrow. He stared at the results of the blood test. Andrew is not modest, and we have a genius. My wife has had several rounds of chemotherapy. It's an old regimen, and it's not always effective. And there are too many barrels. I recently attended a conference with colleagues in Kazakhstan. They also have a breakthrough in cancer treatment, but they have not yet patented their method. We've already done all the tests. Now we're waiting for approval. Men began to discuss professional issues with passion, and Jenna distractedly thought about the strangeness of her fate. After all, the fact that her lawful husband had abandoned her and a complete stranger had come to her aid could not be called anything other than the will of Providence. When the men finished talking, and Jenna asked David, "Explain why you called me wife." The man looked at her with a look that penetrated into her very soul. "Does it make you uncomfortable? To be honest, I haven't had time to realize everything so suddenly. You know, it's a complete surprise to me too. It just came out. But it doesn't seem random to me. Think about it. It's no accident that life brought us together. You and I are two lonely people. Maybe we should create something strong and warm together. Let's give it a try." In such an original form, David proposed to Jenna. While the woman was undergoing treatment in the clinic, he worked part-time on the ambulance as a paramedic. Later, a friend helped him to recover in the profession. Difficulties with the couple arose when they decided to sign. Since Jenna already had a stamp in her passport, she decided through a lawyer to file for dissolution of marriage with Andrew. And that's where the confusion began. The lawyer's inquiry received a reply that Jenna was presumed dead. Not only that, but it turned out that her husband had searched for her, but to no avail. Therefore, she was declared missing after the expiry of the deadline, and her ex-husband had already remarried. Jenna had to prove that she was alive. A friend of David's helped her in this endeavor. When all the formalities were settled, Jenna confessed, "You know, David, for me the most undesirable thing is to return again to the city where I was betrayed. It hurts to think about it. You don't. I know it's very hard. But if you keep looking back, you're gonna miss the future." You know what I mean? Jenna knew very well what those words meant. At first, it was very difficult for her to get used to her new life. But after the birth of her son Tony, everything fell into place. Of course, sometimes the past broke into the new life, but it happened less and less often. When David was offered a transfer to the city where Jenna used to live, the man decided to consult with his wife. "Jenna, here's the thing. I don't know where to start." The woman smiled. "Start with the main thing. It'll be easier that way. You're right, as always. I've been offered the position of chief physician at the new clinic. But there is one thing. Jenna's getting suspicious. What is this clinic is in that city you don't want to remember." The woman was silent for a long time, and he waited for her answer. Finally, Jenna, "You are a man," smiled. "David, I guess this is another trial I am destined to go through." Jenna, you are catching up with the mystical fog again. It's just a coincidence. If you're against the move, I'll back out tomorrow. No, David, you don't have to back out. You've done so much for me. I don't want to interfere with your career. Besides, the past is long gone. How many years has it been? I'm just afraid our son won't like the idea of moving. But Tony's taking the news very well. Yeah, I don't really give a shit. I'll be able to finish my studies in Canada or move to a 7-seat institute if Dad helps. Of course, David couldn't turn down a small request from his only son. But everything was so fortunate that he did not have to use his connections to solve this important issue. Tony was immediately enrolled in university at the Department of Computational Mathematics. In short, everything was going well at the new place. Jenna smiled at her thoughts and pushed aside a box of dishes. If my men had put together a wall and a closet, I'd be quietly arranging the dishes right now. We'll probably live among these boxes for a year. I'm going to have to schedule a sabbatical in the house or this process won't move forward. Jenna spoke up loudly enough. She didn't notice when a smiling Tony appeared on the doorstep. "Mom, who are you talking to?" The woman flinched. "Tony, can you scare your mother like that?" "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I hear you talking. And there's nobody in the room but you, so I thought we had a poltergeist. Don't tell your father about the poltergeist. He'll make an appointment for both of us." "What about Mom?" "There's an upside to that." Tony made a careless movement and bumped into a pyramid of boxes. The lightweight structure began to fall apart. The guy tried to hold on to the cardboard cubes, squares. There's a real otherworldly force at work in this apartment. I didn't even touch the boxes. They fell right on top of me. Jenna laughed. This is your punishment. For what? For not helping me. Let's at least sort through our luggage a little. By the way, you could not wait for your father, and you could arrange at least small furniture in your room. No problem. We'll put everything in its place. Until late in the evening, Jenna and her son tried to create some comfort in their new home. The joint work was successful, and they had an appetizing dinner. Tony remarked with amusement that Papa would come tomorrow and be surprised. But David could hardly stand on his feet from fatigue. When he came home in the morning, Jenna was even alarmed to see him in such a state. David, you're all right. You look terrible. Be thankful I'm still standing and even able to walk. What happened? I had to go to the table myself. It was a very bad case. Can you elaborate? In general, I mean, there's such a thing as doctor-patient confidentiality. Jenna pretended to be offended. If that's the case, I'll have secrets from you too. The man put a fake smile on his face. Jenna, I just don't want to tell you that. The man who was brought to us by the rescue team was literally hobbled out of the car. 8 hours we operated on him. 2 teams worked simultaneously because the scale of the damage is horrifying. 1 leg had to be amputated just above the knee. The man is a tough local businessman, which added even more complications. Anyway, it's a long story. And you don't need to know the details. Jenna listened to her husband, and in her eyes was horror. David, he'll live. The man was already sitting at the table in the kitchen, greedily eating a sandwich. You mean this guy? He'll live, but he won't have as much fun as he used to, although he's not the first, and he won't be the last. I've seen worse in my line of work. This one's only got 1 leg. Jenna was not satisfied with her husband's answer, so she continued to ask him about the night patient. And who's the young one? Well, this victim. You think I looked at him? I didn't have time for that. David answered the last question with obvious irritation. Jenna had learned over the years to pick up every nuance of her husband's mood from his voice. Because the man was a balanced character, she realized that she should no longer pester him with questions. Soon this story with an unhappy businessman was forgotten, because in the family every day there were events concerning the closest circle of people. Life in the new place was gradually getting better. When the apartment was put in order, Jenna became bored. And one day during dinner she said to her husband, David, I've had enough of being a housewife. I'm going to look for some work. How do you feel about that? Positive. If you want, I'll help you get a job. No, that's something I have to do on my own. Then do it. David never pressured his wife. Only at the very beginning of their married life did he force Jenna to get a proper profession. It was shortly after the birth of their son, and the woman was adamant about not studying. David, how do you envision this? I have a small child in my arms, and the house is on me too. What's there to study for? Men calmly listened to the fiery speech of his wife, and then said the words that Jenna remembered for the rest of her life. Even the most primitive crust gives a person a number of advantages. That's why reasonable people try to get at least some education, and then you can't predict how life will turn out. Anything can happen, and I don't want my wife to be left helpless. The woman realized that her husband was alluding to a situation from her distant past. She applied for a correspondence course, and 5 years later received a degree in economics. Many times she thanked her spouse for his insistence at that time. The day after the serious conversation, the woman first studied the list of vacancies in the city on the internet. Then she made a few calls, after which she went to the most promising, in her opinion, the employer. The company that attracted Jenna's attention was engaged in sewing and selling textile products. Perhaps her past experience in this field played a decisive role in choosing the place of work. The office was located in a new neighborhood where the surgeon's family lived. Jenna was greeted by a receptionist in the reception area. Betty is a little busy. That's okay, I'll wait. And there were flowers everywhere. It was this fact that pleasantly surprised the woman. The receptionist noticed the visitor's interest and proudly explained, "Betty is obsessed in a good way with indoor plants. She has a greenhouse on every floor of her house too." Jenna automatically asked, "Is your boss's house out of town?" The girl readily nodded her head. Now yes, they had to move to a country cottage after the tragedy with her husband. The secretary was ready to tell Jenna the heartwarming story of the rescue of the boss's husband. But the door of the boss's office suddenly opened and a stern voice was heard. "Victoria, how many times have I warned you to keep your mouth shut?" The girl instantly turned red, not only her face, but also her neck and arms. Jenna had time to mentally pity amateur gossip, but at that moment she was invited into the office. "Woman, are you waiting for a special invitation? If you are about employment, come in quickly, because I have a meeting at the city hall in half an hour." Jenna went into the office and sat down on the end chair. As the hostess was examining some documents, the visitor took the opportunity to get a closer look at her future boss. Betty was about the same age as her, maybe 3 to 5 years younger. A strict suit emphasized the advantages of her figure, and the perfectly styled hair showed that this woman was meticulous about her appearance. Betty took her eyes off the papers and looked at Jenna. "And what position are you interested in?" Jenna put a packet of documents on the desk of the head of the company. "I don't care. I'll even take a job as a bookkeeper." The hostess again cast an inquisitive look at her. "Where did you work before that? What is your length of service?" "It's all written down in my workbook." Betty smiled. "Don't take offense at the dry reception. It's a necessary measure because everyone comes in. Some have no credentials at all, but they insist on claiming to be top-notch economists." Betty quickly looked through Jenna's documents and smiled again. "Go to Human Resources and get them processed. I hope you and I will have a fruitful partnership." The educated applicant headed for the exit, but she was caught up by the same pleasant voice of her boss. "Jenna, when can you start work?" "As soon as tomorrow. I've been dying of boredom in 4 walls for almost 4 months now." "Why'd you leave, if it's no secret?" "My husband's a surgeon, and he's been offered a job at a new clinic." There was a shadow on Betty's face, but she smiled again. "It was very nice to meet you. If you're starting your duties tomorrow, come see me first. I'll bring you up to speed. I'm new to the job myself. My husband used to run the company, but before that my father ran everything." Jenna waited for the rest of the story, but there was none. She realized that her questions in this situation would be inappropriate. At home, she pleased her husband and son. "My dear men, my period of idleness has come to an end, and tomorrow I go to work." David looked at his spouse with disbelief. "It's amazing. People can't get a job for months. But you got in at the first go, and in such a promising position. Share the secret. How did you do it?" Tony decided to put in a good word, "Dad. Don't you know how it's done? A small but preferably expensive present or a valuable envelope with a sum. That's all." The head of the family couldn't stand the insolence of his offspring. "Tony, do you have a warped perception? I have never taken money in my life, so I don't advise you to mention such things in front of me from now on." And the young man grimaced and crawled out of the table. How hard it is to live around the right people. "Dad, but it's a tried and true rule that if you don't give a hint, you don't go." David glared. Jenna had to resolve the accumulated atmosphere. There's no need to argue, and Tony Poppet is right, because you can't brush everyone under the same label. I don't know how things will work out for me in the future, but my first impressions of the company are pleasant. Jenna got involved in the work quite quickly. She diligently did all the tasks of the management and also diligently avoided close contact with the employees. She had been invited to join the company of tea drinkers on several occasions, but the woman had always politely declined. Jenna had decided before she moved that she would not renew old acquaintances, and when she got a job, she realized that new connections could also be dangerous. For a while, women still tried to bring her into their circle, but their fervor quickly waned. But Jenna heard the latest gossip. So one day she overheard two female coworkers discussing Betty. Personally, I'm sorry. William's a normal woman, but the man's not decent. She got a kick out of that remark. Sympathetic female coworkers, the other one responded to her with undisguised snarkiness. They are all normal when they sleep with their teeth against the wall. I think all bosses are scum. Betty's hubby's in the same category. That's why he got his ass handed to him. Now he's getting what he deserves with a spoon. You can't gloat like that. Why don't you kiss him for all the nasty things you've had to put up with from him? Remember when I asked him to give me financial aid for my husband's treatment? What did he say? We're not a charity organization to throw money around. The earth is round, and everyone will get their due. And this one got his. Jenna let her guard down and carelessly moved a thick file from the desk. There was a loud pop and the women fell silent. Subsequently, the chief economist had heard such conversations more than once, and the female employees of the department shamelessly wash her bones. But Jenna tried not to pay attention to this unpleasant detail. Outside the window again raged spring, and Jenna wondered how the whole year flew by unnoticed. The long weekend was approaching, and she and her husband planned to go to the village to visit the graves of Jenna's close relatives. But unexpectedly, Tony interfered with those plans. The son showed up while the woman was preparing a meal. "Mom, where do you kill so much for a year?" Jenna looked at her son with a critical eye. "You have a short memory as a girl. I warned you that we'd go to my home village for the weekend." The young man slapped his forehead with the palm of his hand. "Exactly, Mom. I have everything out of my head. I don't have time to go to cemeteries. Tony, we had a deal." "Mammy, my circumstances have changed. I was hoping we could have a little banquet here at home." A beaming smile froze on her son's face, and Jenna realized she couldn't be angry. She sighed doomedly. "And what are we going to have a banquet in honor of?" Tony had gone into his hair. "Mom, to be honest, I don't even know how to say it. About Dad, I'm afraid to even mention it. What is this guy talking about?" First he measured, then he squeezed his eyes shut and blurted it out. "Julia and I have decided to get married." The partition nightboard slipped out of her mistress's hands and her legs became absorbent cotton. Jenna slowly lowered herself into the chair. "Okay, Tony, let's get this in order. Who is Julia? And why did you decide to marry her now?" Tony pulled up a stool. "Julia's my girlfriend. We've been dating for almost a year. She's a great girl, and we have a lot in common. Anyway, we decided we should be together." "Son, what about love? We love each other. Why wait till we're old? I'm already 22. Julia's a year younger than me. And then I'm in my last year." Jenna was in a state of stupor for a few minutes, so Tony's enthusiasm gradually wore off, and he remarked resentfully, "You're strange people. You parents only care about your own worries. I came as a human being. I shared my joy with you. And you, Mom, sit like a statue." Jenna made excuses. "It's just so sudden, son. How did Julia's parents feel about your decision?" "Bah, not yet. We were the first to know. Julia's afraid to tell their parents too. Her mom's all right. She's normal. Her father is a real satrap, even though he's disabled. Julia is terrified of him." "Tony, but you're still going to have a serious conversation with your fiancé's parents someday." The boy didn't hold back, looked his mother in the eye. "Julia and I have thought of everything. You are the most reliable person, so you must help us." The woman was surprised. "And what will my help consist of?" Tony made himself comfortable on the stool again. "Well, for starters, you need to bring your father up to speed. And then we'll organize a little party here, invite Julia and their ancestors. In other words, you're taking it out on us, although your creative ideas are commendable. But I'm not sure my father would go for that. And then you said yourself that your girlfriend's father is disabled. Even a short trip can be a lot of trouble for someone with a disability." Tony immediately became sad. "Mom, you're right. What do you suggest we do?" "We should change the plan a little bit. That is, have a get-together at Julia's parents' house. Tony mumbled thanks for the advice and, with his head down, wandered back to his room. Jenna continued in a state of stupor. The only thing that was going through her mind was what family? He's just a kid. No responsibility. In the evening, Jenna told her husband everything. But unlike her, David took the news very calmly. Jenna, don't worry. It's true. Almost all men stay boys until they're adults. Let them try to start a family. Maybe it'll work out. And if it doesn't, a man takes his wife's hands in his own. Jenna, calm down. Realize that our son is a grown man. We don't need to patronize him and put up obstacles. If we stop him from wanting to get married now, he could end up a loner in his old age. Let's help him. By the way, I can take over the organization of the Evening of Acquaintance. I will meet with future relatives, talk to them. The woman snuggled up to her husband. What a good man you are, aren't you? And I'm so happy I met you then. I hate to think what would have happened if it weren't for you. And don't think about it, because we agreed that you would never look back. Jenna managed to stick to this rule for a long time, but she had no idea how it would turn out for her to meet the parents of her son's fiancée. David was very surprised when he found out that the father of the very Julia and his patient, who was once put together by one and the same person, did not even know how to treat this circumstance. As the patient had a very difficult character, rather even scandalous, he literally and turned on all the nurses and doctors too. Almost all were to blame for the fact that he will now remain an invalid. David even had to raise his voice once. Listen to me. You were literally put together in pieces. Just by incredible labor managed to save the other leg, which, excuse me for the details, was crushed into a flapjack, flying into the cabin motor. All of this was compounded by the presence of other equally serious injuries and a very impressive amount of booze in the bloodstream. You should be thanking everyone. And you're constantly disgruntled. The nurse girls are doing their best, running in front of you, and you're hiding your anger at them. The patient averted his eyes, though the doctor could see that he wanted to argue only, and muttered, "How would you behave in my place? I was a man, and now I'm a log. I can't walk or do anything. I can't do anything." David sat down on the edge of the bed. "You're wrong. There have been prosthetic limbs for a long time. It's hard to imagine. It'll take time to heal, and then you can think about prosthetics. Yes, they're not cheap, but I understand you'll be able to afford one." After this conversation, he became much quieter. And a little while later, a woman knocked on David's door. This patient's wife. "Doctor, I'm sorry. I found out that my husband doesn't give a quiet life to anyone. I'm very ashamed of him, but I've come to apologize. Please forgive me. My husband has always had such a troubled temper." David, I could see that the woman was genuinely upset and realized that she was really ashamed. They talked for a while, and the doctor was not left with a good impression. And now it was her help that he was counting on for the difficult mission he had so recklessly undertaken. Betty came home. Andrew had been out of sorts as usual half an hour ago, but today her out of sorts were far more out of sorts than his. As usual, he began to grumble. "Nobody needs me here alone. It's the so-called daughter who's always out and about. The wife doesn't care about her husband at all. You could lie down and die." Betty wanted to talk calmly, but she couldn't. He got angry. It's not nice when the whole world isn't at your feet, isn't it? He looked at his spouse in surprise. He had long been accustomed to the fact that Betty had somehow withdrawn herself from any business scandals. She minded her own business, stayed out of his way, even when his father-in-law died, and his business was completely taken over. Betty didn't even try to take charge. She was perfectly content to do her daughter's charity work. You know, being a socialite. What do you mean? Or are you just trying to remind me that I'm not human anymore? You know, Andrew, I may surprise you, but your humanity doesn't depend on how many legs you have. Andrew got nervous. He didn't like it very much at all that his wife was now in charge of the factory. He'd always done everything neatly, of course, but it's all women in there. I told her something. Olia, What do you mean by that? If you've been spilled something at the factory, it's the stupidest thing in the world. To believe all sorts of gossip from people who are sticky with envy. Betty smiled. You know, Andrew, if you weren't who you are right now, I'd kick you out the door and out of my life. That he even raised his voice. Who does that woman think she is? Today I was going through some papers in the closet behind the desk. And you know, I came across a very interesting document. I can't say I was too surprised, because I've long since realized that you're the kind of person I'd expect any kind of shenanigans from. But I think it's a bit much. The company belonged to my father, and it was supposed to go to our daughter. But you've decided to reorganize it. I wonder why. Or do you think I'd disinherit my daughter? Andrew's eyes flickered. How could he forget about the fact that a year ago he had already prepared this package of documents, prepared and put them away so that when the opportunity arose, he could quickly sign them. Betty, you see, he didn't have time to finish. A housekeeper appeared on the doorstep. Betty and Andrew, you have a visitor who says he's the doctor who operated on you after the accident. They looked at each other, and Betty said inviting. To be honest, neither Betty nor Andrew understood why the doctor had come. David said hello and smiled. I'm here on a very important matter. Betty made a gesture with her hand. Please have a seat. Perhaps some tea or coffee? No, thank you very much. I'll get right to the point. The thing is, my son is dating your Yulia. Betty raised her eyebrows. Tony, your son David has raised his hands. So there you go. I'll tell you right away, and then you can answer me. Our children have decided they can't live without each other, and they need to get married. Of course, they're both still quite young. But when do you fall in love if you're not young? We wanted to invite you to our house to discuss the situation, but we thought it would be more convenient to meet at your place. David cast a quick glance at Andrew, who was already blushing with anger. To get married. When she arrives, I'll arrange it. Betty looked at him sternly, and for the first time, Andrew was embarrassed. The woman turned to David. You've thought and decided the right thing. I also think we should talk about it. Talk, listen to the children. It's quite possible that they have very real feelings. Let's do it this way. Friday at 6 o'clock, we'll see you at our place. David realized there was something going on between the couple, perhaps a power struggle. He got up easily. Oh, good. It was nice to meet you. He walked out. Andrew angrily asked, and what was that? Betty turned to him and smiled radiantly. What was what? Our daughter is getting married, and will probably have a son-in-law to run the company. Andrew even choked with hatred and helplessness. Right, why would he need a company now that he's disabled? Jenna smiled at her husband's reflection in the mirror. But David, like you. He raised his thumb in admiration. Honestly, I don't even know what to say to you. It's like you're 20 years old. So delicate, so beautiful. No, of course you're always beautiful. But now it's like I'm younger, like I've gone back 15 years. Oh, I'm embarrassed. It's just that it's that kind of family. You have to look the part. But we're no worse. Jenna smiled, spun around. Tony walked into the room. He was wearing a suit that fit him like that one. Mom, how's it going? Well, the groom. Mom, but I'm serious. Jenna laughed, even though it was a little sad. Before she knew it, her son had grown up. It seems that not so long ago, together with the doctors, they had preserved a fragile pregnancy, which did not want to accept the unsteady body after the illness. But they managed, stood firm, and Tony appeared. All is well. Tony's son finally looked at his mother with his eyes. Wow, you're my princess. David laughed. That's what I mean. On the way, David stopped at a flower store. So, princess, you sit here while Tony and I buy flowers for Julia and her mother. Go, go, go. Jenna covered her eyes, trying not to show David that she wasn't feeling well. She hadn't slept much tonight, all because as soon as she fell asleep, she had the same dream again that she had had years ago in the hospital. Jenna jumped up. She was wet with sweat. Her body was shivering, and the small, evil, glowing eyes of the predators were in front of her eyes again. She was never able to sleep again. Memories came flooding back that hurt terribly. She couldn't understand why she was having that dream again. After all, everything was fine now. What if anything, if the disease was going to come back? After all, it happens. After many years, it just comes back and finishes what it couldn't do before. Jenna saw the men returning and smiled. No, it was just a dream after all. When you have such protectors around, nothing is scary. They drove up to a large, luxurious house. The gates swung open and the car rolled into the yard. Jenna suddenly remembered that her boss lived somewhere in this neighborhood. She turned to Tony. "Son, I didn't even ask what Julia Betty's mom's name was." Jenna laughed. "No, there's no such thing as coincidence. I mean, how small is the world?" "That looks like my boss." David looked at her in surprise, then slapped his forehead. He didn't have time to say anything, because Betty came out to meet them. Jenna smiled at her. Betty stopped in surprise. "Jenna can't be." "As you can see, it can be. Though I find myself no less surprised." Betty waved her hands. "Well, it looks like you and I are going to have to communicate even more. To be honest, I'm very happy about that. I think you and I are going to do very well together." After a brief exchange of pleasantries and flowers, Betty invited everyone to the table. David wondered where the head of the family was. He noticed the immediate gloom, but Betty replied that he would join us a little later. In fact, she didn't know if her husband would show up at all. They had a very big conversation. Not only had Betty discovered documents that lacked her signature to transfer the entire firm to Andrew, but lately, she'd been hearing dry tales about his adventures as well. She had always tried not to listen to gossip, but in this situation it all snowballed. In addition, Andrew had been very harsh about his daughter's marriage. He didn't like it all. Betty said, "If you're going to ruin everyone's mood, I want you to know. I'm going to ruin it for you. Julia is our daughter, and she doesn't need to know what's going on with you and me." In the shower, Andrew realized he'd already lost. He should back off and wait and think. But how he wanted to arrange the meanness so that his family and his daughter would not be born with this chip who once decided to teach him about life. In the middle of the feast, when they had already raised their glasses to their future family, the doors opened and Andrew entered the living room. His wheelchair stopped quietly by the doctor's table. "Good afternoon, everyone." Julia snapped out of her seat. "Daddy, it's about time. I thought you'd never come out to see us." She kissed Mill's father on the cheek, and Andrew thought a little. Betty smiled faintly. "But it's possible to be normal. Meet my husband, Andrew." Andrew gave a mock bow and suddenly heard Andrew. It was a voice he'd recognized from 1000. Slowly, very slowly, he raised his head and met his eyes with Jenna's. There was a heavy silence at the table. Betty asked confusedly, "I don't understand. Have you met my husband?" Jenna smirked. His heart was pounding frantically. "Not just acquainted. Your husband was once my husband." Julia and Tony looked at each other. Tony asked Mom, "Are you okay? Were you married?" "Before Daddy again. Had a son, though not for very long. When my husband got fed up with me and my illness, he decided to feed me to the wolves." Betty gasped. "No, it couldn't be. His wife is missing." "I know this story." Jenna continued to stare at the pale Andrew. "Andrew, what about you? Let's tell Betty what really happened, how you lied. You told me you were taking me to the Israeli clinic at the airport, but you drove me into the woods. You left me there in the winter and drove away. Do you remember how I screamed? I asked you to stop, and you ran away, bouncing in the snow." Julia looked at Jenna with eyes full of terror. Tony opened his mouth at all. "You couldn't close it." And Betty stretched out. "So that's it, is it? Missing in action." Then Andrew stared at Betty and at Jenna. He was afraid to move, afraid because he could see the look in Jenna's husband's eyes. That doctor wanted to nail him. It had been a year. Jenna, rather Betty, peeked into her deputy's office. "What's Betty started? It's over already. Look, look." Julia was on the video call on her phone. She looked tired but happy. "Look, your grandmother's now." Tony and Julia left at once. David helped his son transfer to university, and the children left there quietly signed and learned to live with family. Andrew was sent to the very apartment he had once registered for himself. Betty promised to pay for his caregiver for the first time, but only on the condition that she never saw him again. "You know, you should thank God you're disabled. Otherwise, we'd have put you in the slammer." "Betty, how could you? We love each other. You're not confusing anything. Now we both know exactly why you married me. I feel sorry for you. You never carried true love in your heart. Without it, a man has lived his life for nothing. For what? Why did you do it all for? You did this only to find yourself alone and almost destitute. The law of the boomerang." David learned that he had become a grandfather only after an operation in which he was saving another life. More recently, he realized that life sooner or later puts everything in its place. Already after they visited Julia's parents, he, while walking in the park, heard a man, "Do not let go," missing with the judge on the bubble. Usually he never gave for booze. At most, he could buy beggars' groceries. But now, for some reason, he turned around and was dumbfounded. In front of him stood the very man who had once been his friend, and then had set him up so badly. "What did you find out?" "Him, and he'd gotten himself in trouble." "That means you're living well." "I see. I am. You look like you deserve it." He took out a bill, put it in his ex-friend's hand. "Drink to me." And then he left. There was finally peace in my soul.
Subscribe and click the bell.
Camille put a tray of pies in the oven, wiped her forehead with a corner of her kerchief, and sat down at the table. Leaned back in her chair, she led the kitchen with her gaze, assessing the results of her work. Soup ready, cutlets on fried. Mashed potatoes on mint wrapped in a warm shawl, resting on the edge of the stove. The mimosa salad is ready, stands in the refrigerator, prescribed vegetables on vinaigrette cooked, and already cooled. It remains only to peel them and chop the salad, and everything is ready. Just by that time, the pies will come up. Don't forget to take the compote out of the cellar and put it in the fridge. And put the kvass in the same place to cool down from the road. It's always nice to drink a mug of cold kvass. Camille got up and went to the veranda to get a jar of kvass. It was cool on the veranda, and a light breeze blew through the closed doors. Hearing the curtains, it lightly rubbed anything hung on the door against the flies. Camille leaned over to tighten the corner, the curtains, and when you saw that from the gate to her porch walks neighbor Emily. "Hello, Camille." The woman greeted her. "I see you've been on a roll this morning. You must be expecting company." Camille, on the side, let the neighbor into the house and carefully held the net on the door behind her. "I don't want any more flies in the house." "Hello, Emily." She nodded. "Come to the vase. I'll pour. I have guests tonight." "Yes, that's right. You guessed it. The kids are coming." The neighbor sat down to the table and nodded. "Thanks to a mug of kvass." I looked at the kitchen. "They're not coming alone, are they?" she asked. "Are they bringing friends or bridegrooms?" "No, not alone." Camille shrugged. "They didn't say anything like that, at least. Though they might pick up someone at the last moment. With them it happens so where, what only uncooked." Emily wondered. "You could feed a company of soldiers here. Do you think it's too much?" Camille said doubtfully. "I wanted to chop up some vinaigrette. Evelyn likes it. No problem. If they don't eat it tomorrow, I'll take it with me. I don't have time to cook in the city. It'll come in handy. You know, Emily, I can't cook little by little. I can't get used to it." A few years ago, Camille Milne had a large family. Her mother and father lived in a rustic house. She and her husband Sebastian, and their 2 children, daughter Evelyn and son Kevin. 3 generations under one roof lived peacefully, friendly, happy, and prosperous. The first house left Evelyn, went to the city, studying at the medical university. The girl from the age of 10 dreamed of becoming a pediatrician and diligently went to the realization of his dream. Camille and Sebastian consulted with their parents and bought their daughter an apartment in the city, so she wouldn't have to go to the hostels, a one-room apartment. But it's enough for the girl for the first time. And then how will she get married? Let her and her husband think how to expand. The older generation decided. 2 years after Evelyn left, Camille's mother died. She suddenly went to bed one day and never got up again. The woman was only 74 years old. She had never complained about her health, so her death came as a surprise to the whole family. Hardest of all, Camille's father experienced her mother's passing. He married her when they were both 17 years old and was used to being close to her all his life. The death of his wife was a serious blow to the old man. After the funeral, he noticeably gave up, began to complain often. Then the heart, then the legs, then the lungs. Grandfather smoked. From the same 17 years and after the death of his wife, he began to cough a lot, above with a squeak and with a thick mouth. He outlived his wife by only 11 months. He passed on. After burying both parents within a year, Camille bolted. Without her father and mother, the house began to feel empty, and her heart grew dreary. She wasn't used to being separated from her parents for long. They almost always lived together, but life did not allow her to be sad for long. First, her son Kevin graduated from high school. Exams, graduation, moving to the city. All these troubles took over the woman. Then Evelyn graduated. Graduation again, state exams. Graduation, job hunting. And then Sebastian's husband suddenly fell ill. What he was complaining about, I couldn't understand. Somehow it was bad, but I can't explain, as he said. Here and there the office would pull, and then everything seemed fine. Camille made her husband undergo a full examination at the hospital in the district center. However, it did not bring clarity. Not that the doctors in the rural clinic were not too qualified, not that the equipment did not allow to conduct the necessary research. It's unclear. Sebastian, meanwhile, it's a big blow, and looking noticeably worse than before. The Milne couple went into town. Evelyn took in her father's appearance. She got all her fellow students and university professors on the horn. She pushed for appointments at the most modern clinics, examinations, and the best equipment. Eventually, the cause of Sebastian's poor condition was identified, but it brought no joy to anyone. Oncology, a malignant tumor in the intestine, which metastasized to many parts of the body, including the bones. Sebastian was prescribed treatment, but warned at once that it is more supportive to remove cancer from the body at this stage is impossible, but to prolong the life of the patient for a couple of 3 years can still be tried, and they tried on injections of chemotherapy and regular radiation. Sebastian Milne lived for another 3 years after his diagnosis. In the last months, he did not travel anywhere, did not leave the house further than his own yard, and often did not get out of bed at all. But before that, he remained quite active. He worked, socialized with his relatives and children, put his affairs in order. And Camille hoped to the last that everything would be all right and her husband would recover. That's why she couldn't get used to his death for a long time. After burying her husband, the woman was left alone and struggled to get used to the empty house. The children stayed in town. The son came for vacations, and the two of them and their sister tried to visit their mother every weekend, or at least every other weekend. Camille always prepared diligently and happily for their visit. Sometimes the children brought friends with them, and then the house would come alive again, becoming noisy and cheerful. The woman loved such visits most of all, and always secretly hoped for them. And she always cooked in abundance just in anticipation of possible friends and friends of Evelyn and Kevin. The company of young people always lifted her spirits, helped her to keep herself in tone, and not to slip into the abyss of depression. This time, The children came alone. And judging by the look on their faces as they unloaded from the car, they'd had a little argument on the way, or at least a serious argument. Evelyn ran up to her mother, gave her a hasty peck on the cheek, and immediately spoke. "Mom, but do you have any idea what he's come up with? It's impossible." "Yes, wait." "Literature with good-natured mockery," said Kevin. "Let us at least say hello first." He was 5 years younger than John, but in some unfathomable way he managed to behave with her as if she were a little sister. Kevin leisurely approached his mother, hugged her, and kissed her on the cheek. "Mommy, hello," he said affectionately. "It's all right. I'll tell you everything. There's no crime. Don't worry, Evelyn." He turned to his sister. "You can help me unload the bags from the car. I can't carry all this stuff by myself." "What bags?" Camille was surprised. "We brought you some goodies," smiled the son. "My, you're feeding us." "Because I overslept today. I didn't even have time for breakfast." "Of course, my son." Of course he's worried. "Camille, I've got everything ready." She rushed into the house and started setting the table. The children brought into the kitchen a dozen store bags filled with household cleaning products and various household trifles. There were stores in the village, but they were not very good. To buy a decent washing powder or any spices other than pepper and mustard, you had to go to the district center. And this was not always convenient for Camille, who was left without a car after her husband's death. Therefore, the children made it a habit to bring everything they needed from the city. The woman periodically tried to return the money spent on the gifts, but the brother and sister invariably refused, even though they sometimes had to quarrel with their mother over it. So this time, Evelyn waved her hand dismissively. Mom was no more offended. She almost forced Camille to put the purse away. They sorted out the bags, finished lunch. We had pies and compote. And then Kevin said, "Mom, well, I've decided to leave school for a while. I'm taking a leave of absence to work for a while." "What's wrong?" Camille shook her hands. "Didn't you pass? I thought you said you were done." "Sessions are fine," nodded the son. "I just feel like I've lost interest in this specialty. I need to think about it, sort myself out, get my thoughts in order." "Don't worry about it. I already got a job. I start Wednesday. The company sells computers and parts. They need a storekeeper for them. Federal company just came to our area. It's all white, all official. The salary isn't bad, but it's a 5-day week. You can't combine it with your studies." "That's good, of course," Camille said thoughtfully. "But Kevin, you've only got one more year to go. It's a shame to drop out in the 5th year." "That's what I'm saying," said Evelyn. "You should have gotten your degree by now. And then do whatever you want. Wouldn't you lose a year?" "It would take a year to get a degree in a field I'll never work in." Kevin raised an eyebrow ironically. "No way, sis, that's not for me." Evelyn pouted. She herself had never gone to work in a hospital or clinic after graduating from medical school. Camille was surprised by her daughter's choice. She remembered that Evelyn had been planning to become a pediatrician since the 5th grade, and all the time she had been in school, she had paid extra attention to the subjects she would need for admission. But Evelyn was able to explain her position to her mother. "You see," she said, "I love kids and I'd love to work with them, but every kid has a parent. And that's a living hell. There's almost no one with any sense. They all think they're smarter than the doctor all the time. They argue and make up their own diagnosis. They don't agree with the treatment. They complain. What did you give them? Not the drug they wanted. Or you gave them a massage, and it's inconvenient for them to go to it. Today, all parents treat their children or advice from the internet, or on the precepts of their grandmothers with the help of folk medicine. And it is still unclear what is worse: Baba baby to feed from 2 months or mother's milk to wash his eyes. Yes, wash to cataracts. And then the pediatrician is to blame. Did not warn Mom. I have no nerves are not enough to work with such parents." Evelyn had time to evaluate the parents of her future patients during her university internship. And then, having received her diploma, She went to the courses of a massage therapist. Having learned the basic techniques of massage, she began to practice on acquaintances, friends, former classmates, and even her own brother. Gradually, she improved her qualifications, mastering, in addition to the general, strengthening, and relaxing massages, also cosmetic, anti-cellulite or drainage, promoting weight loss sports, and even therapeutic. With the acquisition of new skills grew in the client base of the girl. Sociable, cheerful, shallow with strong hands, with a medical background. Evelyn quickly gained clients, and soon she didn't even need to advertise her services. She was passed from hand to hand, recommended as an excellent specialist. It was not uncommon for families to have her services. Evelyn was making a great living. She renovated the apartment her parents bought. She had done excellent repairs and bought new furniture. She regularly helped her mother and brother with money. And in the last year, she had been thinking about buying a car. It was difficult to get around to clients who lived in different parts of the city. Taking public transportation was becoming increasingly inconvenient. In general, Evelyn thought that life was successful and she had chosen the right profession. What's not working in her specialty? So now Mom is a girl, poked in the direction of her brother and turned to her mother. Mom, I'm telling you for sure. If he goes to academy now, he won't come back to university. So at least he'd have a diploma, even if not to work on it, but still a higher education. Nick from, what makes you think I won't come back? My brother was surprised. I just want to think about whether I need this higher education and whether I need to go back there. We have a couple of majors related to mine, and I can transfer there or I can go back and finish my studies here. I don't know yet. I'm telling you I need a break. Camille sighed. She understood why her son had made this decision, and she also understood that there was nothing she could do to help her boy. He has to deal with this stage of life on his own. Evelyn is not big, the woman said tiredly. If Kevin has decided so, then so be it. He's a grown-up guy. He's already capable of taking responsibility for his own decisions. Let him do as he knows how. Thank you, Mom, Kevin said with feeling. I was sure you'd support me. In the evening, after putting the children to bed, Camille sat on the porch for a long time looking up at the night sky. She was unhappy with her son's decision to leave the university, but she realized there was nothing she could do about it. It was useless to persuade him, and there was no point in forbidding him. Kevin was long past the age of prohibition, and so was Evelyn. Camille was sure that her son would not return to his studies, but the only thing she could do now was to support his decision. She hoped that with a year's sabbatical, she would be able to convince him to get his diploma. She could think of no other solution. Camille understood what was happening to her son until now. Even though it had been 2 years, he had not been able to cope with his father's death. In the Milne family, Sebastian was the real head of the family. His authority was unquestionable. He was by no means a domestic tyrant. The man treated everyone in the household with respect. He took care of everyone, equally tried to make sure that his loved ones did not need anything. In any situation, he listened to the opinion of each of his relatives. But the last word always remained with him. That's just the way it was. Camille was not a downtrodden housewife at all. She worked because she wanted to work. She ran the household as she saw fit. She didn't have to account to her husband for expenses, free time, and child-rearing methods. It was just that she, like everyone else in the house, had gotten used to having Sebastian, the hope and support, the very linchpin around which the whole family paid. He knew how to do any job without dividing it into men's and women's work. He was able to solve any problems from material to mental. Next to him, it was always reliable and calm. Children in the family, Milne, were brought up in respect for their father, and always, no matter what happened, were confident in him, his support, his help. Naturally, when Sebastian was gone, the sibling world had developed a serious crack. But it was easier with Evelyn. She and her mother had been to the funeral and cried heartily for 9 days. They started to figure out how to move on. If you felt sad, you could always sit next to her or in front of Sebastian's picture and cry like a woman, and the pain would go away for a while. But this therapy didn't work with Kevin. For the first time after his father's death, the guy was some kind of frozen inhibition without emotion. He didn't shed a tear at the funeral, just hugged and comforted his mother and sister. And then, even after a little while, he'd get over everything, shifted his grief inside himself, but could not get rid of it. Kevin strengthened himself in front of his mother and sister. He tried to behave as usual, but sometimes Camille, the bastard, poured it into the moments when the guy thought no one saw him and noticed on his face confusion, helplessness, and pain. She didn't know how to help. She tried only to be more affectionate to her son, to support him in everything. Now she realized that Kevin simply had no energy left for studying. He was too exhausted by inner worries. If it were possible to simply take the grief from her son and live it instead of Kevin, she could cope, could do it. But alas, with such troubles each person must cope independently. It cannot be passed on to others. Camille thought that she had bought her son a separate apartment for nothing. Kevin lived with Evelyn for the first years of school. Yes, the apartment was one room, but brother and sister always got along well with each other and got along well together. After her husband's death, Camille decided that she could afford to buy another apartment for Kevin. First of all, she thought, it was time for the kids to get on with their lives. Evelyn's in her early 30s, and Kevin's a big boy. Living together in one room of the novel will not be neither Kevin girl to bring, nor John fiancé to invite, and even just with friends to get together will not work. Sooner or later you will have to solve this issue anyway, so why not now? And in the second place, Milne hoped that the search for an apartment and the subsequent putting it in order somehow distracted Kevin to disgorge him will be the thing that will pull the son out of the longing for his father. To some extent, her calculation had paid off. Kevin actively participated in the search for a new home, with interest went to viewings. Carefully and intelligently assessed the advantages and disadvantages of each of the options. After the deal, he moved from his sister into his own Khrushchevka and began to make repairs in it. Evelyn almost immediately had an affair with one of her former classmates, and it seems, would soon move out with him. And then, God willing, she would get married. For her daughter Camille was only happy. But here is a son while he lived with his sister and still somehow distracted from his grief troubles. Cozy Evelyn constantly breaking him then, demanding help in the household, then pulling him out for some walks to the movies to sit down. They even have a tradition that Kevin meets her from late orders and brings her home by transportation or cab or car. It didn't matter. It all kept the guy motivated to keep up. After the move, Kevin had no such drive. He, of course, diligently engaged in repair and has already put in order the kitchen, bathroom, and corridor of the apartment. What did he buy the walls in the room for? But household chores were clearly not enough to keep him afloat. Needed a person, next to a person who understood his condition, able to share his grief. Support the guy. Evelyn had handled it for a while, but from a distance, letting a couple of blocks away to provide support, it had become more difficult. She'd seen her brother's condition, of course, and tried to keep a hand on his pulse. Called him every day, visited him regularly. Discreetly monitored his acquaintances, fearing that the guy in a desire to get rid of depression will sit on alcohol or some substances. But it wasn't enough, so Kevin couldn't take it anymore. He ran out of energy, even for the institute, and his friends were mostly college friends. I thought Camille would drop out. Who will he socialize with? He needs someone to be around, to give him a background. At least he could make friends with someone at work. The woman sighed. In principle, her boyfriend is cheerful, sociable, friendly. God willing, there will be new buddies, will help him through this black streak in life. And it would be better, of course, a girl found. Love it helps to survive any adversity, thought the woman. And the age is already suitable. You can think about marriage. And if Kevin gets married, there will be no time to be sad. About marriage, Kevin Milne did not even think. Moreover, he considered this event for himself impossible. In the first place, because the romance with girls required mental strength, and the guy recently simply did not have them. He easily got acquainted with girls, easily attracted them, being intelligent, friendly, and not without a sense of humor. He was even fond of some of them himself. But after a week of other communication, Kevin usually realized that he was unbearably tired of the new girlfriend. At first, he just disappeared from the sight of girls. But over time, he decided that wasn't quite fair, and learned to reduce the relationship to nothing, to transfer them to a friendly or buddy rails. By the time he was 22 years old, the guy became a master of easy, non-committal flirting, and it did not upset Kevin too much, because he and only he alone in the world knew about the second reason why neither marriage nor a long, serious romance was impossible for him. A wife, like a steady girlfriend, needed to be slept with, and that was something the guy had a big problem with. Kevin found this out when he was in his second year of study. Previously, girls were not of much interest to him. At school, he was just friends with his classmates. At university, due to his specialty, he was surrounded mostly by guys. There were only 3 girls on their course, and all of them were already taken by the end of the first year. Kevin could probably hit it off. One of them would start right away. But for the first year and a half, the guy was busy just settling in at uni. Yes, and in general to adjust to city life. And then you couldn't count on classmates. It was Kevin who first fell seriously in love. By the middle of the second year with Jenna, he met at a student party and was conquered by her at first sight. The girl was not a stunning beauty, but there was something in her features, in her lively pilot, in her slim and agile figure, something that intentionally drew Kevin's gaze to her. Light, cheerful, spontaneous, mischievous. She reminded him of a curious chick who had recently learned to fly and was now checking every second to see what else his wings could do. Kevin did not leave the girl all the evening, and at the end of the party went to walk her home. In the end, the guys walked until the morning and parted reluctantly, feeling that not everything has not yet told each other. They started dating. They spent all their free time together. Kevin brought the girl to his sister's house several times. He himself was at her house, met her parents, and even became friends with her younger brother. Walks, dates, and a kiss. A few months went by. One day, Jenna invited Kevin over for a sleepover. Her family was going to visit relatives for the weekend, and the apartment was vacant. Kevin bought flowers and a bottle of wine and flew to the girl as if on wings, not suspecting that this evening their romance would end ignominiously. The dinner went beautifully. But when the young people were in bed, it turned out that Kevin was completely unfit for sex. His body refused to respond to Ken's touch and caresses. Jenna already had some experience in sexual relations, so she tried to excite the guy as much as she could. But after half an hour of effort, the girl just cried and screamed, "You lie to me all the time," she howled. "You don't like me. You don't really want me at all. You think I'm ugly." Kevin was shocked at his own body's betrayal. He liked the girl. He was in love with her, fascinated by her. He wanted to want her. And he categorically did not understand what was happening. Attempts to calm the girl down had gotten him nowhere. Jenna simply kicked the suitors out the door, barely letting him get dressed. The next days, she did not answer the phone, did not show up at school. And when Kevin still managed to track her down near her house, she made a scandal with demands not to approach her. The guy didn't have time to explain. And to be honest, he didn't know how to explain what had happened. One thing he knew for sure was that he was done with Jenna. With a technical mind, Kevin began to explore his own body. He used all the pornographic movies, striptease, bars, OBL, madness with girls, unencumbered by moral principles, whom he met in bars. Remembering that he and Jenna had been drinking wine that unfortunate evening, the guy conducted some of the experiments sober, and before some of them he drank a couple of bottles of beer or other alcohol of different strength. The result was always the same. Excitement would occur for 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes and then disappear. Kevin was embarrassed and confused. He didn't want to take on the role of an impotent 20-year-old. After thinking, ordering the embarrassment deeper and gathering all the willpower in a fist, the guy made an appointment with a urologist. At the student polyclinic, the doctor listened to the complaints, examined the patient. He questioned him for a while, then began to explain the data. What is the reason for the inappropriate behavior of the body? Kevin listened diligently to the doctor, but whether from fright or embarrassment, he understood little. The only thing he could grasp was that he needed a small operation. It's treatable, the doctor said. It's not a sentence. One small operation. You can even do it under local anesthesia, and everything will be back to normal. There's a short recovery period of about a month. But there's one thing that's not covered by the HMO. It will have to be paid for out of your own pocket. The figure named by the doctor could not please any student, even those who receive an increased scholarship like Kevin. But it turned out that without the operation, intimacy could be forgotten, and therefore life in general. At least that's how it seemed to the 20-year-old. Kevin thanked the doctor, collected the papers and appointments, and left the office. He needed to consult with someone, to tell someone about what had happened. But who? Talking to his mother or sister about such things was out of the question. It was necessary to have an adult, experienced man with whom one could talk in confidence in this environment. Only his father could be such a man. But the boy was ashamed. His father had been fighting cancer for years. Predatory diseases are slowly eating his body from the inside out. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of money. And then Kevin, as a young, healthy guy, comes to him to complain about the fact that he trivially does not stand. No, you can't even think about that. He'd have to come in with a runny nose, wouldn't he? And if his father gets the seriousness of the problem and gives him money for the operation, where would he get it? Take it away from his treatment. That's the only way. Kevin didn't like that option. On the other hand, maybe he could do without the money. Maybe Dad would just tell him what to do, how to behave, where to find a cheaper clinic, how to get back in touch with Jenna. Just sympathize. Heck, that would be a huge help to Kevina already. While the guy was thinking about what to do, Sebastian Milne died. The problems of sex went to the background and reminded of themselves only a year and a half after the funeral. Kevin, tired of fighting the darkness inside alone, agreed to a friend's invitation and went to some party. After getting pretty drunk, he found himself on the balcony of someone else's apartment, hugging the strange girl, going on a bender. He thought, have a drink, go wild, spend the night with this girl. Why not? He listened to his body and remembered why not. His body was behaving as usual, not wanting to get aroused. Kevin, how'd you get rid of the girl? Did you go home? He was already living alone, so he didn't have to explain to his sister about coming home late drunk. Kevin spent the next month researching the city's logical and anthropological clinics. He made appointments and underwent examinations. Finally, he found a place where he could get the surgery he needed for relatively reasonable money. All that remained was to get the right amount of money, and the guy decided to earn it on his own. He took a leave of absence from his studies, found a place with a suitable salary, calculating that if you save half, then in a year and a half he will be able to save up for the procedure. And he began to save on everything he could, so that he could repair his body in less than a year. Not his mother, not his sister. Of course, he never told me the true reasons for leaving the university. The staff of the office where Kevin got a job was small. A director, a system administrator, 2 salesmen, and a storekeeper. Kevin himself, his superiors more than once offered him to take another loader in the warehouse for the assembly of especially large orders. But the guy refused, preferring to work part-time as a loader himself. He needed the money, and there were not too many orders so far, and it was quieter to pick up the goods yourself and release them yourself. You know for sure that there will be no confusion. Kevin quickly established good relations with his colleagues. He became especially good friends with one of the salesmen, Robert. The guys were the same age and bonded over their love of Gothic culture, dark metal music, horror movies, and thriller games with relevant themes. For some reason, after his father's death, Kevin felt an interest in this culture. Not to the extent, of course, to dress up in black hoodies and call himself then in the external entourage. He did not see the appeal, but the theme of death attracted the guy. Robert, on the other hand, despite his gothic leanings, was a cheerful and friendly young man. Like Kevin, he was a newcomer, but he had not yet found a place of his own. He rented a room near the office and was always jealous of his buddy and his separate apartment. "You're a lucky man, Kevin," he said. "Your own place. It's a fire. You can bring girls over every day. But my landlady is like a Cerberus. Even if you invite someone to visit, she walks around, eavesdropping, afraid not to make any noise. No romantic atmosphere, you know. You don't appreciate it. What you have, you don't appreciate. Where do you get those girls?" Kevin joked. "From the customers. We only have mostly men coming home. I drive a car, you can't get acquainted on the bus. I'm at my mom's on weekends too. We're online dating," Robert proclaimed. "It's the most modern and stress-free way, I'll tell you. There are several city entertainment portals. They're often timed. It's like you and me in an ICQ on work correspondence. Only there is a conversation for several people at once. Whoever wants to come in and talk. That's where you get to know each other. If you like a girl, you set a meeting. And then it's a matter of technique. There's just one thing, but the girl can be scary." Robert made huge eyes, made a scary face. "Are there any pictures?" "No," Kevin wondered. "Well, not by default. You could, of course, ask for a picture before you meet. You know, like, how will I recognize you?" "Well, it's not like she's gonna send a picture of herself." "Well, whose is it? Maybe a picture of a cute friend. She could Photoshop her own. Or maybe just send a good photo of her from a good angle. You know, there are some people who look hot in photos. But in real life, they're mama." Kevin laughed, then said, thinking, "But if the girl herself is interesting, and it is pleasant to communicate with her, then let her look as she wants." "Well, yes, you can just socialize," Robert agreed. "But you don't have to meet for that. We correspond at least every day, and that's all there is to it. By the way, there are many of them there too, who do not want to get acquainted, but just want to chat. Let me write you the address of the site. You'll see for yourself." That same evening, Kevin went to the chat room and a week later realized that he was suddenly drawn into such communication. It turned out that he didn't even realize how much he missed the opportunity to just talk to people about everything that was on his heart. With his mother and sister, despite the trustworthiness of the relationship, he still had to choose the topics and words. With his colleagues, we communicated in a friendly framework, which did not imply special frankness. And in the undercover chat room, meaning nothing. Nick, you could talk about anything. Joking, candor, outpourings and attacks, the hitchhiker effect in the modern version. Kevin made several accounts and changed them depending on his mood. One nick was used for normal communication. He used the second one when he felt the urge to be particularly frank. On thirds, when he wanted to talk about death and Gothic. He was careful not to mix up his accounts, and he was heartily spared by the way the tone of his interlocutors changed depending on what role he was playing today. These little hoaxes kept the guy entertained. Kevin appeared in constant interlocutors, communication with whom gradually and unobtrusively moved to the real. And a little later, the main joint of the chat room decided to organize a meeting of all users, so Kevin got a whole company of buddies at once. It turned out that the site recorded mostly young men and girls about his age, students, yesterday's school children, university graduates. They quickly found a bunch of common topics and interests. They organized activities together, from going to the movies to trips to the mountains. They helped each other with their studies and work. In general, they socialized quite closely. Kevin was grateful to Robert for pointing him to this site. The new campaign to lighten Kevin's depression had quieted down a bit. It was like a lurking thing. It seemed to him that he had quite coped with his condition and his longing for his father. and things would only get better from here on out. One thing bothered the guy. The sum for the operation did not want to accumulate. There were always some unforeseen expenses that forced him to get into his savings and take out a part of it. The car needed urgent repairs. The refrigerator broke down, and he had to buy a new one. Then his mother got sick and needed to buy her medicine. Kevin diligently continued to replenish his piggy bank, but the rate of savings did not please him. However, he reasoned, there was nowhere to hurry. Doctors said that you can operate up to 40 years old, and the girl, for whose sake it is worth going under the knife, he still has not met. So the guy just continued to work in his chosen direction. From the university, he was listed at his own request, and I said triumphantly, said Evelyn, having learned about it. Well, if you so choose, sighed her mother upon receiving the news. After all, you can recover if you think you can. Kevin suspected that he would not change his mind. After working at the company for a little over a year, he was surprised to see that a college education was not necessary at all to make good money. And it was not even necessary to hold managerial positions. More important was knowledge, the ability to quickly navigate a situation, to work with people and be responsible for everything you do. Diplomas were secondary. Having realized this, Kevin finally stopped worrying about the fact that he left the university. It seemed to him that there was nothing to worry about anymore. Everything was going according to plan, as he had planned, and everything would be all right in the end. At that time, Kevin did not know to what extent he was wrong. The chat room user meetings became a regular occurrence. They met once a week on Saturdays in a small bar with billiards and music. The composition of the participants was different each time. Someone could not free a day off to go to the bar. Some, on the contrary, were at the meetings every week. New participants came, old ones dropped out. It was not uncommon for private members to bring some of their boyfriends' friends, girlfriends, wives and husbands, young relatives. Kevin took a cup with him to the meetings several times. His sister's personal life still wasn't working out. And the guy thought that some of the guys in the chat room might be quite suitable for her as beau. Evelyn was not impressed by the guys, but found at the meeting several clients for massages, as well as a couple of girlfriends, with whom she then actively sat in clubs and parties. So Kevin decided that the trip had not been in vain. One day someone brought Wendy to the bar. She said she'd come with a friend. She had recently registered on the site and was shy to go to a general meeting with a crowd of strangers. Alone. The friend ended up spending about half an hour at the bar and left, while Wendy stayed. She introduced herself to everyone as Wendy, but calling her anything other than Wendy was impossible. A short pooch with funny round glasses, perky curls sticking out of her hair in different directions. She gave the impression not of a grown-up girl, but of a mischievous little girl. Kevin wanted to take care of her, put her on his lap, feed her semolina, wrap her in a blanket, and tell her stories until she fell asleep. The touching and funny girl turned out to be, however, not a bad conversationalist. She was in her third year of pedagogical school. She was going to teach algebra and geometry. She was terribly worried that her students wouldn't take her seriously. She was into fantasy and folk rock. She wrote humorous fanzines based on her favorite works, sometimes went to festivals with the role-playing crowd. She herself wore Candlestick was not, but made various costumes, jewelry and paraphernalia for the games. In short, acted as costumers. Over conversations about all this, Kevin did not notice how the evening flew by. "You have a very interesting company," said Wendy, saying goodbye. "I'd love to hang out again. Do you get together here every week?" "Yes, every Saturday," Kevin nodded. "But we can chat on the internet on weekdays too. Let me text you the chat room address." That you waved your hand, Wendy. "What internet? I don't even have a computer. I was going to buy one for school and for work. But it turned out to be so complicated. So many different features, you have to understand them. And I don't understand a thing." "Let me help you," Kevin suggested. "I work in this field. Will you tell me how you're going to use the computer? What do you need it for? And I'll find a configuration for you." They exchanged phone numbers and agreed to call each other during the week. And already on Monday, Kevin was surprised to realize that he was waiting for a call from a new acquaintance. Wendy didn't call until Wednesday. But then they called each other several times a day for the rest of the week. On Friday, the girl came to Kevin's warehouse to pick up the computer he had picked up for her. "How are you going to hang all this up?" asked without writing a bill of lading for the removal. "I'll call a cab," shrugged the girl. "Will you help me carry the boxes to the gatehouse?" "You're in a hurry. If you come for a couple of hours, I'll drive you myself." Unexpectedly for himself, the guy offered. "Work. I'll finish and deliver everything in the best way. We'll hook it up right away." "Come on." Wendy was happy. "And now, not to wait in vain, I'll run for sandwiches." "Okay, I saw a cute little cafe on the way over. They sell takeout. I just want to eat. I want a nightmare." "How do you want what?" Before the end of the working day, Kevin managed to finish all the business and have tea with Wendy, with the sandwiches she brought. Then they loaded the freshly bought computer into the car and went to the girl's house. Wendy lived alone in a small studio apartment. Such a layup was new to Kevin. He looked around with interest at the dwelling of a new acquaintance. "To be honest, I do not really like that there is no wall between the kitchen and the room," the girl admitted. But it was the cheapest option possible. Such apartments are just beginning to be built. Buyers are not used to them yet, so they sell them cheaper than others. My parents and I decided that it would do for the first time. And then we'll see how life turns out. In principle, even convenient, Kevin grinned, connecting the cables to the system unit. "The refrigerator counts. You don't have to go far near the computer. When I lived with my sister, I had a computer in the kitchen. Only there was room. I like it very much. When I moved it into my room, I missed having a refrigerator within walking distance." Wendy laughed. She was fiddling with the stove, and when Kevin finished setting it up, she called him over for dinner. She was a great cook and a great girl. Kevin was even surprised that she cooked such serious dishes as minced meat and peppers, complex side dishes, and puffed salad for herself. He himself was too lazy to cook porridge and made do with half-finished meals, cutlets or sausages with some uncomplicated side dish like pasta or buckwheat. "You can't lose the skill." "Really?" Wendy explained to him when he expressed his surprise. "And if you floss for a few months, you'll forget all the recipes. I try not to let that happen." "You're a hero," Kevin said with feeling. "I'm not capable of that. It's nice and cozy. The food is good. I don't even want to leave. So just stay," Wendy said and put her hand on his arm. The girl's intentions and expectations were clear in her gaze. Kevin stirred. He liked the girl very much. He was attracted to her, but he suddenly imagined what would happen if he stayed the night. He would get into bed with her, respond to her caresses, and after a while he would run away shamefully under the shouts of "Ah, so you don't want me, you lied. You think I'm a homeland." He shuddered. "Wendy's in a private party now," thought he suddenly told some of the girls there. "Word will get out. Yeah, they'll think it's inferior to make fun of him." That's just what was missing. Wendy sensed the change in his mood and asked wearily, "Something's wrong." "I thought you liked me," Kevin nodded. "It's just that, Wendy, I like you a lot," the boy said, deciding to be frank. "I'd like to do more than just stay one night. I'd like you to be my girlfriend." Wendy's eyes flashed joyfully with embarrassment. A smile appeared on her face. "Oh, really, Kevin?" "Yes, Wadley," he pronounced. "But you see, here's the thing. I can't have a serious relationship right now. I'm having some health problems, and my whole focus is on them right now. I need to finish my treatment, and then I'll be ready to think about having affairs with girls, that is, with you. And it's a little awkward for me to offer myself to a girl who's a sick inferior." He shrugged his shoulders with an embarrassed grin. "Something venereal." "Anxious?" asked Wendy. "No, not at all," Kevin laughed. "From that point of view, I'm perfectly healthy. I can submit any certificates. If you want, it's different. I won't detail it. I'm really embarrassed. a young guy with sores. But I promise you, in 2 or 3 months it'll be over. And then, if you're still interested, of course, I will be, Wendy said firmly and nodded as if to confirm her words. I'll wait. In the meantime, we'll just hang out as good friends. Of course, Kevin laughed lightly, stood up and hugged the girl. But I'm going now. Okay. He drove home and pondered what to do next. He didn't have enough money for the operation yet. He needed about 2 times his salary. He could try to borrow from one of his buddies, even from Robert. He'd mentioned more than once that he was saving most of his paycheck without knowing what for, or take out a loan. He's got the seniority now, or even ask for a loan at work, and that he's in good standing. The director should go along with it. If you get the money in the next couple of days, you can start preparing for the operation next week. All the tests can be done in a couple weeks, plus weeks of hospitalization, maybe even less. Then a month for recovery, just the 2 months he'd promised Wendy. Kevin feared the girl wouldn't wait any longer. Of course, she assured him otherwise, but who knows about young girls? She was only 20. For her, perhaps 2 months seems like a prohibitively long time. Meanwhile, he didn't want to lose the girl. Kevin spent the whole weekend researching the websites of various banks. The interest rates on consumer loans seemed ridiculous. He would have accepted them, but the banks thought the amount he needed was too small. The minimum loan amount almost everywhere started at $1,000, and none of the banks provided for early repayment. He would have to pay a nightmare amount of money, Kevin thought. But in principle, it was worth the risk. Robert had been unavailable all weekend. He didn't see his buddy until Monday when he came to the office. The guy ran to the warehouse himself. He plopped down on the chair with a bang and made a solemn declaration. Yes, it's a draw. I'm getting married. His face shone with that stupid smile that one sees only in young men who are in love with each other. That's news, Kevin marveled. Give me the details. I don't think you mentioned anything like this on Friday. I met this girl, Robert exclaimed. She's beautiful. She's smart. She's a fire in the sack. You can't pass that up. I just met her and got married right away. Kevin grinned skeptically. No, we've been dating for a couple months. Robert was a little embarrassed. I was just afraid to say anything so I wouldn't jinx it, you know. We went to meet her parents on Saturday. They live in the suburbs. They have a house. And I asked her to marry me. And she said yes. I'm moving in with them this week. I'll have to buy a car so I can get to work properly. There's transportation, but you know, it's a long commute. I'm in the middle of it. Your stash will be enough for a car and a wedding, Kevin smiled. He was happy for his buddy. Well, as long as it's for the car. Robert was a little confused. But I'll make enough for the wedding. What's that? We haven't discussed the details yet, but I think I can handle it. At least show me the bride, Kevin said good-naturedly. I can't jinx it now. There's nothing to be afraid of. And easily agreed, buddy. We're going to a new coffee shop downtown tomorrow. They just opened it. Interesting to squeeze in. Come with us after work just in time. I see, nodded Kevin. Go to work, fiancé. You're probably breaking up in your email. Robert went to his office and Kevin, though happy for his friend, felt a little disappointed. He couldn't borrow money from him now. He needed the car, the wedding more than he needed the money. He'd have to bow to the principal, and the principal was surprisingly okay with it, even when Kevin said that he needed the loan for medical treatment, and once he got it, he would go on sick leave for a while. The supervisor didn't object. He promised to prepare the documents and told him to come for the money tomorrow. And added lastly, you have, by the way, we have not been on vacation once in a year and a half. That's just how we'll get you a vacation. During this time, you will solve your health issues. And you won't need the vacation money. I don't know if there's any unforeseen expenses. Yeah, they were a little shocked. Turns out it was all so simple. Encouraged, he called Wendy and invited her to go to the coffee shop with him tomorrow. The girl happily agreed. It was agreed that he would pick her up after the lecture and take her to dinner. The hall of the coffee house was almost full, but Robert somehow managed to find a free table. When Kevin and Wendy entered the room, he was already waiting for them. He jumped up from his chair. The guy waved at them, and the guys started to make their way over to their buddy. "Are you with the lady?" Robert exclaimed. "Why didn't you tell me? I wouldn't have worried that you'd be bored with us. What's your name?" "Lady," Wendy said sternly. "Nice to meet you. The lovely Wendy. And here's my fiancé. Please love and applaud." Large, tall, he blocked with him the chair that stood by the table. Robert now took a step back and pointed haughtily at the girl sitting behind him. Kevin turned around, and the words froze in his throat. Sitting by the table, smiling sweetly, was Jenna. They didn't advertise their acquaintance, but at the end of the evening they got a few minutes to talk privately. "Coincidences happen," Jenna said thoughtfully. "They do," Kevin nodded. "Are you and Robert serious?" Jenna raised an eyebrow and looked at the guy with an uncertain expression. "Why do I ask? Did the other guy rush into it? If yes, then you and I will have to communicate from time to time. We're good friends, and if I start avoiding you, will it cause bewilderment or something?" "No problem," nodded Jenna. "After all, what did you and I have? A failed affair. It's been a few years. Who could care about that? We won't be best friends, of course," the girl grinned. "But we won't need to be. Right?" "Right," Kevin sighed in relief, although the words about a failed romance had hurt him a little. He figured that the easier Jenna made it to relate to their past, the better. "Who's the girl with you?" Jenna suddenly inquired. "A coworker too? Or did you just bring her along to complete the package?" "That's my girlfriend," Kevin said seriously. Denise made a perplexed grimace. But then Robert and Wendy returned to the table, and the conversation had to be curtailed. Kevin drove Wendy home. They talked and kissed for a long time in the car, and parted only at midnight. He was on his way home, happy and elated. The previous evening the boss had given him a loan, and Kevin even had time to call the clinic where he planned to have the surgery and make an appointment. His vacation was to start in a day and stretch for almost a month. Just enough time for the hospitalization, to prepare for it, and to rest. Kevin could hardly believe that just a little bit more, and he would become a full-fledged man. Gone would be all the complexes that had plagued him for the last few years. Gone would be all the awkwardness with girls. A happy life will finally begin. Especially the girl for this happy life he seems to have already found. Kevin parked in his driveway, thinking happy thoughts in his head. As soon as he stepped inside, he was accosted by a first-floor neighbor from the apartment below him. Kevin lived on the third. There he appeared, finally over the property neighbor from the doorstep. "Where the hell have you been, Kevin? Half of the entrance is waiting for you without water." Kevin froze on the landing, and the neighbor has already dragged him into her apartment. "Look how you flooded me," she said indignantly. The whole ceiling in the bathroom fell down. "What the hell is that? David, did you kill the whole renovation?" Soon the situation became clear. In the morning, there was no hot water in the house. Kevin turned the faucet and washed his face with ice water. And as it turned out, he forgot to screw the hot valve on the savior, and in addition, and threw a rag into the sink, which wiped his shoes before going out. The water was given in the middle of the afternoon. The sink was an old model without overflow rag, plugged the only drain, and the water, filling the bowl, flowed to the neighbors below. Those, of course, were at work and discovered the flood only after 19 o'clock, having returned home. 12 o'clock boiling water flowed down the walls through the ceiling. The neighbor from the first floor washed out the plaster, sprinkled bathtub, damaging the enamel. The neighbor on the second floor was hit harder. He burned out the wiring under the ceiling made of plastic panels. The lights and all the outlets in the bathroom were in disrepair. Worse, water came over the threshold and flooded the hallway, where the Honorable David had recently renovated. New wallpaper was bubbling off the walls. The laminate flooring and driven behind the wave and completely in disrepair. Kevin's own apartment had suffered as well, but this worried the guy least of all. His own place could be put in order gradually, and with neighbors it was necessary to solve something at once. He spent the next day at work as if on pins and needles. Even a call from Wendy didn't improve his mood. In the evening, Kevin met with the neighbors. They calculated their losses and the future costs of putting the apartments in order and provided estimates. Kevin argued with some of them, but agreed with most of them. The troublesome Vanessa from the first floor and the arrogant David from the second floor. Despite their complicated characters, they were men of integrity, and they didn't try to rip off the hapless guy. Kevin took the money to the neighbors, gave each of them money in accordance with their advice, accepted the receipts, which David insisted on, and said that the settlement was made. No complaints, and closed the door behind the visitors, and for a long time looked with empty eyes at the box, in which half an hour ago lay his savings, lay the hard-won sum for the operation, his ticket to a normal life. Now there was a lonely $10 left at the bottom of the box. Everything had to start all over again. Evelyn was finishing massaging a client when she heard the short trill of the phone. A text message. The girl thought. Hardly anything urgent. She finished her work, cleaned herself up, got her paycheck and went home. The client lived in the same yard as Evelyn, so she fearlessly agreed to late visits to her. And now, when the Mashews came out of the entrance, it was about midnight. Evelyn sat down on a bench near her house for a smoke and a break. Remembering the trill of the phone, she pulled the machine out of her pocket and opened a new message, and choked on the cigarette smoke. Evelyn, she read on the screen. If you got this message, it means I'm no longer alive. I can't do this anymore. And the text was Kevin, and it took Evelyn a lot of concentration and rereading it several times to realize what it was about. She dialed her brother's number, but the phone responded with the standard unavailable caller message. She dialed again, and again going up to her apartment, looking for her purse, quickly changing into her sneakers. Knocking on the door of a neighbor she was buddies with who had a car. It seemed to Evelyn that the damsel time after time bringing the caller, temporarily unavailable, already sympathized with her, but could do nothing. She didn't get through to her neighbor and ran into the yard, hoping to find some random cab or hitchhiker on the street. Evelyn almost ran into her brother's car on the sidewalk. Is this some kind of joke? She shouted, almost out of control. The girl tore open the driver's door of the car and saw that Kevin was sitting in the passenger compartment with his head down on the steering wheel. Evelyn grabbed her brother by the shoulders and presented, turned him around and sent him away in horror when she saw the look on his face. Evelyn muttered to Evelyn, I'm sorry I couldn't. The plan was simple. Drive out of town, get to the abandoned warehouses a few kilometers outside of town, accelerate properly, and drive full speed into the concrete wall of one of the structures. The walls there were solid, thick. Kevin remembered that from the times he'd wandered through those warehouses while playing watch. He wrote the message about his sister when he arrived at the site and set the delayed dispatch for 2 o'clock. He reasoned that should be enough time for him to accomplish what he had planned. And even if by some miracle he survived the collision with the wall at 200 hours, the internal bleeding and fractures would put his body in the right state. No medic would be able to get him out. The plan was simple. Only the boy's body didn't agree with its owner's plan. His consciousness was trying hard to end this drudgery called life, but his reflexes were stronger. When Kevin accelerated for the first time, his hands, as if automatically twisted the wheel to the right a few meters away from the warehouse wall. The guy made several more attempts, but the result was the same every time. He swerved before he reached the saving wall. His body was not going to die, and tried with all its might to preserve his life. Yeah, I wish I'd brought alcohol with me. I'd have had, say, a bottle of vodka. It would have dulled my reactions, and it would have been easier to crash. But he dismissed the idea of going to get alcohol. Hell knows what could happen on the way. Wouldn't he chicken out, finding himself again among people, not staying or lying drunk outside the store, unable to find the strength to get back to the place? He decided to trick his reflexes, and the last run he undertook, blindfolded his eyes with a handkerchief, found everything in the glove compartment of the car. But it seems that his brain during the previous attempts had already managed to memorize the distance at which to turn. He was only a few meters wrong. His hands twisted the steering wheel again. The car slammed the door on the corner of the building and stopped on a bump. Kevin opened the door by feel and tumbled out of the driver's seat onto the ground. The car stood a little away from the warehouse where the asphalt ended and the former lawn began. The bandage pulled back from his face. He rolled around on the ground for a long time, pounding his hands on the grass and howling. Then he got back behind the wheel and, as if on automatic, drove to his sister's house. He couldn't remember the road, so he parked in the driveway. Kevin just sat in the car, staring at one point in front of him. His mind was spinning with thoughts piling up on top of each other. Wimp, you couldn't even die. You can't do anything. You're not a man. You're a wretch neither to get a girl, nor to save money, nor to lay hands on yourself. You shouldn't have been born in the first place. Shame on you. And he put his head down and woke up only when he heard his grandmother's cries and felt her fingers clawing at his shoulder. Evelyn almost dragged her brother to the apartment, threw him on the couch from behind the metal across the room, and she sobbed, then shouted some curses, then grabbed Corvalol and Valocordine from behind her. In the end, the girl collapsed on the sofa next to her brother, wrapped her arms around him, and burst into tears. Kevipa sat motionless until the sobs subsided. Then he began to speak in a mechanical, emotional, alien voice. He told everything about Jenna, and about her scandals, and about his sense of inferiority, and about his fear of having relationships with girls, and about his experiments, and about his trips to urology, about his examinations, about his attempts to earn money for surgeries that failed endlessly and tormented him completely, and about Wendy and the loan at work and the flood. Evelyn listened, and when the story was over, she said brokenly, "But you're a dummy, a juvenile dummy." "No, I know it was embarrassing to say. But we are not strangers." Kevipia, so many years of silence, tormented. "But wouldn't I have helped you?" But Kevin didn't hear it all anymore. Having finished talking, he passed out right there on his sister's couch. He woke up the next morning, and at first he was surprised that he was lying in the apartment, fully dressed, covered with a blanket. His head was as dizzy as a hangover, and his body was developing some kind of incomprehensible weakness. Bit by bit he remembered last night, and to the weakness was added a burning shame. He could not imagine how to talk to his sister now, and in general, how to live on. Kevin listened. The apartment was quiet. Evelyn must have raced off on her own. He had to pull himself together and leave quietly. They'd have a talk to explain, but then they'd do it later. If only Evelyn had the sense not to tell her mother, he thought. Kevin tried to get up, but realized that his body was barely obeying him. His head was spinning. He struggled to sit up on the couch, and after spending less than a minute in a relatively upright position, collapsed back onto the cushion. Getting behind the wheel in this condition was out of the question. "I'll call a cab," the boy thought. He reached for the phone. But then the front door slammed loudly and footsteps sounded in the hallway. Evelyn was back. Kevin squeezed his eyes shut. Let her think he was still asleep. Maybe he'd gone out again. But Evelyn walked over to the couch, crouched on the edge, and put her palm on her brother. The palm felt nice. "Chilly doesn't pretend," quietly said the sister. "I can see you're awake." "It's okay, Kevin. We'll get through this." The boy opened his eyes carefully. Evelyn looked at him with careful sympathy. She was slightly alarmed, but not angry. "I was afraid you'd run without me too." She smiled softly. "That was the thought," Kevin agreed. "That was the thought," Kevin agreed. "Where were you running to?" "Early in the morning. I went to the bank," Evelyn explained. She reached into her purse, which was lying on her lap. "Here's one for you." She took out a wad of money and put it on the pillow in front of Kevin. "I consulted here a little while you were asleep," she explained. It should be enough for everything, tests, surgery, and even a paid room, if you need it. I was saving up for a car, but then I thought, I don't even have a license. Not yet. And the money's lying around. You need it more. Evelyn. I, Kevin, am totally embarrassed. I don't know. I'm embarrassed, and you're embarrassed in general. Evelyn was indignant. It's embarrassing for me to know that you're tormented and have cockroaches in your head. It's okay for me to walk around wondering when you're going to get hurt next time. No, brother, take the money and go to the doctors. If you're confused about anything, first of all, know that it's not all there is. I still have my savings. And second of all, keep in mind, I'm not here to help you so much. I'm not so much helping you as I am helping my own peace of mind by buying from you. You get the surgery, you start dating your Elena. You marry her. And then I don't have to worry about you. I breathed a sigh of relief. Kevin suddenly laughed. He propped himself up on an elbow, put his arm around Evelyn, and pulled her down onto the couch behind him. She was still dizzy. Evelyn, you're the best sister in the world. Feeling, he pronounced. Thank you. And I'm sorry, I really was an idiot. I'll give you the money. I promise I'll earn it and give it to you. In the meantime, I'll be your personal driver. Do you want? The operation was a success, and the recovery period was no trouble either. It proceeded in full accordance with the predictions of doctors. Still, Kevin was a little worried, going to the last checkup. But the doctor, having made the necessary arrangements, said solemnly, "Well, congratulations to you, young man. You can lead a normal, full-fledged sex life, but I only beg you not to throw you into all sorts of trouble. We have good wine at our clinic, of course, but it would be better to stay away from them." Kevin laughed and fervently assured from Kulikov that he was not going to indulge in debauchery. Before the first night with Wendy, Kevin was, of course, quite nervous. The assurances of the doctor is one thing, but what if in practice something goes wrong? However, feeling that his body obeyed him and behaved according to the situation, he quickly relaxed, and when Wendy pressed her whole body against him and whispered in his ear, yes, it was worth the wait of a couple months. For the first time in years, he felt completely happy. The relationship theirs was progressing like the best of dreams. The girl was easygoing and fun. She was interesting to talk to. It was easy to organize ventures and little adventures like sudden trips out of town and night rolls around the city. Rosy friends with her were wonderful to spend time with in bed and nice just to be around. Kevin had even almost abandoned the chat room because Wendy was completely enough for him to override his need for trusting companionship. He introduced the girl to his sister and was happy to see them becoming friends. Wendy and Evelyn spent hours on the phone, discussing some of their feminine secrets. From time to time, they went shopping or to clubs, or had coffee shop get-togethers. Camille, Kevin also introduced his favorite, and she approved of it. They visited their mother at least a couple times a month. One day on one of their visits, Camille sat her son down beside her and sternly asked, "How long are you going to fool the girls? Are you thinking of getting married or not?" "I think you should," Kevin smiled. "We talked about it, but we decided to wait until Wendy finished her studies. When she gets her diploma, we'll get married then." "All right," Camille nodded. "Are you going to get your degree? Or my wife will be educated, and you'll be uneducated." The woman grinned good-naturedly. "Mom, I don't need a diploma yet. I need to work to save up for my wedding, and then my wife will be young. You have to feed her every day." Kevin laughed. "Oh, it's up to you, of course." His mother shook her head, and after a moment's silence, she added a little, "She's a good one, Wendy. I wish I'd lived to see her. Would he have liked her?" "Yes," Kevin said after a pause. "I think my father would have liked her too." And he put his arms around his mother and pulled her to him, kissed her on the top of her head. He thought that for the first time in years, he didn't feel bitter about his father. Kevin's jokes about his work were not in vain. The company he worked for was gradually expanding. Turnover was growing, and the client base was developing. Accordingly, The staff was growing. Kevin himself had recently become a warehouse manager. He was assisted by 2 storekeepers and 2 loaders who worked in shifts. The sales department has grown. The chief hired 3 new managers who were now supervised by Robert. The guy was terribly proud of his new position and bragged about it to his future wife. He and Dimka continued to live together and planned a wedding for the end of the summer. Kevin and Wendy occasionally visited them, but the guy noticed that Wendy did not like Jenna and tried to minimize such visits. He would bring Robert to his house or meet him on neutral territories, in bars, cafes, at some events like concerts or mundane parties. Kevin didn't really understand why he was acting this way, but he felt better. Right. However, in the middle of the summer, a friend persistently called Kevin to his place. He needed help with the repair of the car, and he timed it to coincide with the weekend. He decided that after the repair work it would be possible to go to the river, to grill kebabs, and in general to enjoy all the delights of summer vacation in the village house. Kevin agreed, but Wendy suddenly opposed the idea. The guy explained as best he could that he had already promised and that it was awkward for him to let his buddies down. But the girl deflated, all through Friday night. By Saturday, they still hadn't made up, and Kevin left for Robert's with a heavy heart. He decided that he would try to finish the repairs as soon as possible, so that by evening he could go back and make up with his beloved. "Yeah, I don't know," Wendy said sadly into the phone. "Maybe I behaved wrongly. I don't think so, no offense taken. But it's Jenna who's so mean. I can't even explain why, but I don't want them to communicate." Evelyn sighed. She knew why Jenna was nasty, but she wasn't going to tell the girl about it. She would have to reveal her secrets herself, but she was tired of hearing Wendy whine too. "Wendy, it's okay," she said soothingly. "I'm sure Kevin will come over and you two will make up." "Wait, he's calling me. I'll call you right back." Evelyn dropped the call with Wendy and took the call from her brother. But after talking for a couple minutes, she did not call the girl back. She simply forgot about her. Throwing Petrovka on a house dress and grabbing her purse, Evelyn rashly rushed out of the apartment. Her way lay to the intensive care unit of one of the city hospitals. She was in a hurry, persuading the cab driver to go as fast as possible, but she was too late. When the girl rushed into the ward, Kevin had already died. The whole thing was stupid and ridiculous. It was a hot summer day. Guys fiddling in the garage in the process of repairing the car drained the brake fluid from the system in the first bottle. It turned out to be plastic, greenish 2-liter from under the spike. After a while, already finishing the work, Kevin, thirsty and without looking, grabbed the first bottle. He managed to take 2 big gulps of brake fluid before he realized that something was wrong. Robert immediately clamored to call an ambulance and have them pump his stomach, but Kevin took his concern and the whole situation rather lightly. He went into the bushes, stuck 2 fingers in his mouth, and said that the gastric lavage was finished. From the entreaties to go to the doctors, Kevin only waved away. Future father-in-law Robert, having learned about what had happened, after half an hour offered the guy to drink a glass of vodka. They say, from the toxins contained in the brake fluid. Ethyl alcohol is an antidote. This, by the way, confirmed later by the doctors who came for the guy. Except that the vodka should have been drunk immediately, and after it all the same to wash out the stomach. But the guys did not take this into account. They finished the repairs and started to gather for shashliks on the riverbank. Kevin, citing fatigue, lay down to rest on a chaise lounge in the shade and dozed off. Robert decided not to wake him. He instructed his mother to explain to the guest where they would rest when he woke up. The company went to the shore, and when they returned in the evening, they found the guy on the same chaise lounge. Friends began to push Kevin jokingly. "Here, they say what Sonia overslept. All tasty." The guy opened his eyes, tried to get up, and rising to his feet, collapsed to the ground. He lost consciousness. Here, of course, called an ambulance, but it was too late. From the brake fluid had already spread throughout the body. It had affected all the organs of consciousness. Kevin never came back. And despite the doctor's best efforts, he died the next morning. How could it be, Evelyn? How could it be? Camille stood by the cemetery bed. Until a few years ago, this section of the cemetery had been empty, but now it was almost entirely occupied by her family and her parents and her husband. And now her son. Things had just started to get better, she said brokenly, and there had been a promotion at work, and her salary had gone up. And Wendy, and he'd gotten over his homesickness, and that's what it was all for. To lie here now. Evelyn hugged her mother in silence. She herself was still in shock. Not since the day Robert had called her from the phone and told her what had happened. Not talking to doctors, not funeral troubles, not caring for her mother, could not rouse the girl, and she became as if slowed down, walked slowly, spoke more softly. She looked as if she were looking at something. She couldn't believe her brother was gone. All three women close to Kevin had experienced his death in their own way. If Evelyn was in a stupor, Wendy was literally hysterical for days on end. She sobbed nonstop. That subsides a little, then again wanted to sob in the anim. Evelyn asked the girl to go with her to her brother's apartment to pick up clothes for the funeral. But there was little use for Wendy. As soon as they crossed the threshold, the girl would immediately drop to her knees and sob in her voice. Evelyn cost a great effort not to consider her for it. Everyone was unhappy after all. She thought, everyone is bitter and hurting. But there are things to do that no one else will do but us. It takes focus and concentration to see them through. Can't stay out of the way and then. Evelyn was greatly relieved when the company of private citizens who had come to Kevin's funeral took the girl in and drove her back to town the day after the funeral. Camille had fallen into a kind of lingering bewilderment. She hardly cried at all. She behaved as usual. But every minute, every second, she tried to understand what had happened to her son. Why was it so? The woman could not accept the injustice of what had happened. She had to find someone to blame. Every day she had a new theory, and every day she shared it with her daughter. I went to see Kevin at work. I told Camille. The boss was giving the funeral money. And the girl who worked with him told me that his storekeeper wanted Kevin badly enough to take Kevin's place. No other way than he poisoned him. Mom is tired, Evelyn said. God be with you. The storekeeper was not with them that day. Camille calmed down for a while, and then it started again. Maybe that storekeeper Robert put Kevin up to poisoning them. Gave him money. For instance, she'd speculate. Well, he'd drop out and Mom would sigh. Evelyn sighed. Robert, Kevin was a longtime friend. He wouldn't do that for money. Besides, it's not the kind of time to be harassed for a promotion. It's not a presidential position either. It'd be something to take the heat for. Camille nodded, but a day later, she was back at it. Didn't the girl who came with Robert to the funeral? I recognize her, she'd say. That's Jenna. Kevin used to bring her here once. I think they were dating. Maybe Robert found out and got jealous, so he slipped her a bottle of poison. Mom, that was years ago. Evelyn struggled to act calm. Everyone had long since forgotten about it. Kevin, Wendy had it. Robert, this Jenna was about to get married. But what jealousy. Wendy, Evelyn. What if it was Kevin himself? Suddenly, Camille said. Wendy said they had a fight before this trip. Suddenly, he was so upset he decided to poison himself. Evelyn's mom raised her voice. Don't talk nonsense. They didn't have a fight, just a little spat. He wouldn't have poisoned himself over it. But Camille wouldn't calm down. She wanted to find out why her son had died. Having questioned everyone who was with him at Robert's, having talked to all colleagues and acquaintances, the woman decided to resort to the help of psychics. Her neighbor Emily told her that in the neighboring village, there is a girl who can communicate with the spirits of the dead. And Camille is going to visit her. Evelyn, tired of arguing, went with her mother. She was skeptical of Camille's ideas, but the idea that Danko might have been poisoned kept her on her toes. She knew, unlike her mother, that the boy had tried to commit suicide once before. Of course, the situation was completely different then. And Kevin's condition was different. But who knows? He was very fond of his Wendy. And maybe their little spat had really hit him hard. Or maybe there was something else in his life that Evelyn had missed. Had she failed to notice and lend a shoulder in time, leading to a tragic outcome? Doubts gnawed at the girl, so she, young materialist, agreed to go with her mother to visit the young media mind. The psychic girl's appearance didn't inspire confidence. An ordinary girl of about 6 years old in a short cathedral skirt, wearing a pink t-shirt with a teddy bear and stompy sandals. Blonde hair tied up in 2 short axe bridges appeared on the sides of her face, cheeks, and plastered with watermelon. It's a crumb of a medium. Don't be ridiculous. However, the girl, seeing the guests, got out from behind the table, took Camille by the hand and led her into the room, nodding to the giver, followed by seating the guests. The girl went out and came back in a couple minutes already clean and hello, Aunt Evelyn. Hello. Camille said it politely. How do you know our names? Camille was surprised. No, he said, shrugged her shoulders. He said you were coming. What else did he say? The woman wondered. He said it was nobody's fault. It's just the way things are, said the girl. He told you to say he didn't mean it. He didn't. To tell you not to worry. It happens. Things don't work out right. And he also said that Uncle gets upset because you worry makes him uncomfortable and hurts. Camille nodded. Then she cried, and Evelyn, rummaging in her purse, took out a handkerchief and handed it to her mother. The girl medium slipped out of the room and returned with a glass of water. Drink it, Camille, she said sternly. And stop crying. You can't drown them with your tears. The woman obediently drank the water, sighed a little, pulled herself together, and thanking the young seer moved to leave. Evelyn followed her. They were already on their way to the wicket. When the little girl looked out of the door, she shouted, Aunt Evelyn, did you forget your handkerchief? Evelyn turned and hurried back to the house. When she reached the porch, the girl dragged her into the hay, wrapped her arms around her, pulled, forcing her to squat, and whispered quickly in her ear. Her not telling you. Telling her to talk Kevin didn't tell her to. He didn't want it to happen this way. He didn't himself. It was the girl who wanted it, not his girl. Another girl. It used to be his. Don't tell her, Kevin didn't say to. She'll be worried. Kevin doesn't want to hurt this girl. Let her live as she wants. He said. What else did he say? Asked Evelyn, and stunned by this fast speech. He said that he loves you, that you are the best sister in the world. Already slower and calmer spoke the girl. And he said thank you for not telling your mother about how he rode in the car. You don't tell me about the girl, and you don't tell me about the girl. Let her live as she pleases. Evelyn promised to take the handkerchief and went out. Camille had calmed down considerably after her visit to the young soothsayer. She stopped looking for someone to blame, thinking up different versions of what had happened. She cried the evening after the trip. She seems to have found the strength to accept death. Her son was often sad. Talked to Kevin, sitting down next to his picture. Talked to her husband too, but she didn't turn on her daughter or herself. She seemed to believe that this was the way things were and to accept it. Evelyn, on the other hand, had fallen into anxiety when she returned from the village to her apartment. She had been pondering the girl's words to the psychic for days on end. The girl wanted not his girl, another girl. Used to be his, it sounded in her head. Under that description, out of those who had been there that fateful day with Kevin, perfectly fit Jenna. But that's crazy, Evelyn thought. Why would she do that? She really has another life, another fiancé. It's been years. What's the big deal? But the girl who didn't know who was next to Kevina or what their relationship was. For some reason, she said that. That phrase can't be explained by a random hit, like the common one. He said he loved you. Maybe she did somehow manage to communicate with Kevin. All the more reason for her insistence on not saying anything to her mother and for not taking revenge on this mysterious girl. She's quite the spirit. Only my little brother would say that. Thought Evelyn hesitated for a while longer. She called Robert and asked him to arrange for her to meet Jenna. Robert was clearly unhappy with Evelyn's request. He spoke into the phone. "I understand, but you have to understand, it's not our fault. Seriously, I really appreciated Kevin. He was my only real friend, and Jenna even more so. She hasn't been herself since that day. We've already been questioned by the police. Like he didn't die on his own. Maybe he was poisoned. Thank you, by the way, for not filing a report." Evelyn, stop making Dimka nervous. Evelyn vowed that this was the last time. The guy sighed and appointed her a meeting at their house. Jenna has been self-conscious about her boyish figure all her life. At 14, most of her classmates could already boast a seductive, rounded figure. And by 16, many of them began to buy themselves a bra size 4. Against their background, skinny Jenna with small breasts and narrow hips looked a little poor. Added sadness and the fact that boys at 16 were more interested in round girls and were not able to appreciate the elegance of the figure. Girls used to tease their girlfriend. "Good for you, uncle," said one of them, "can safely walk the streets at discos as you want to dance. Not that any man would bother you, he wouldn't even turn around." "Yeah, I've been picking up on that. You don't even have to worry about getting raped. No normal man could get a hard-on for a figure like that." Jenna laughed with them, but at home she cried into her pillow. After entering the university and getting a relative freedom from parental control, the girl began to experiment. By the end of the first year, she managed to get into bed with 3 fellow students, but these victories did not please Dimka. Guys were modest nerds, and to seduce them did not have to spend a lot of effort. They could hardly be considered normal men. That all changed when Kevin showed up. Tall, handsome, intelligent but not nerdy. He was more attractive than all those boring locks. Besides, he had a serious crush on Jenna. He admired her. He sought to spend as much time with her as possible. He admired her face and her figure. In his eyes, Jenna saw herself as a beauty. And in addition to that, she herself fell in love with Kevin for the first time for real. All the more intense was the blow she received when they were in bed for the first time. All the old complexes suddenly came to life and came at her with a new force. She felt as if she had been mocked, made to believe in her own attractiveness, and then pushed her nose into a muddy puddle. And this was the man she trusted, the man she loved. It was almost impossible to get over. But Jenna did. Over time, she had etched out her love for Kevin and had almost forgotten about him. She managed to realize that for every figure there is a connoisseur, and there are many men for whom she looks attractive. She became more confident, learned to flirt, gained admirers, and even a fiancé. But when they met again with Kevin, she realized that she could hardly hold herself together. The memory of her first youthful love and first serious disappointment, it was too strong. Even if they had just met on the street or in company, it would have taken her a long time to recover from that chance encounter. And here the meetings had become a regular occurrence. Kevin, since their separation, had matured and gotten even more handsome. Jenna kept catching herself comparing him to Robert. And these comparisons all the time come out not in favor of her fiancé. But even this could be survived if it were not for the girl next to Kevin. Wendy is a fat, shaggy hen with stupid glasses who can neither step nor speak. Naive, overly enthusiastic, simple-minded, stupid. What does Kevin see in her? Why does he look at her with such admiration? Why is he so caring and affectionate with her? What is it that has kept him so long by her side? These questions kept the days going. Each time, watching the behavior of this couple, she became more and more perplexed. And each time, she became more and more angry and resentful toward Kevin. After a while, they grew to the point where it became impossible to carry them around. He didn't want me, but he wanted that fat one. I yelled in Evelyn's face at me. He couldn't get a hard-on for that stupid cow. He told me, I love you. He was just having fun. He was just lying. And I'm sorry for him. Yeah, it took me a year to come to my senses. You can't imagine what I went through. And he's like that, like nothing happened. From that sorpus, Evelyn didn't have to ask the girl anything. It seemed Jenna was already tired of carrying her own worries about what she had done. Evelyn just sat down across from her, asking Robert to remove himself, and took a long look at the girl. Jenna chortled at first and then started to get embarrassed under that intense stare. And when Evelyn asked softly, "Would you explain why you did it?" the girl seemed to burst into tears. I thought he was having fun with her too. Screaming, "She's teasing, enticing. But I see they've been together a long time and sleeping together. They slept over, I was listening. So he wants her and she wants me." Jenna noticed that the guys had poured brake fluid into a lemonade bottle, and the plan was born. It was hot. There was no water in the garage. The girl rushed to the nearest store and bought 2 bottles of it, solemnly brought them into the garage to everyone's approval. When both came, she put one next to Kevin, carefully saying, "Yes, I put it here for you again so that you would not get distracted, if anything." Having waited for the guy to die and memorized the location of the bottle, she stepped aside. And after a while, when Robert were fully immersed in their business, switched the lemonade for brake fluid and ran out of the garage. "I didn't mean to kill him," she said. Evelyn quietly shouted, "I thought I'd just get a little toilet poisoning for a couple days. We got Aukies across the street, so they're drinking breaks every day, and they're alive. I didn't think they were dying from it. I didn't even want to." The girl cried. "I just wanted to do him a little mean thing, ruin his weekend. If you want to get in no mood to settle down with that Wendy box, I'm shocked it turned out this way myself." She burst into tears, and when she subsided, she looked up at Evelyn with cold eyes. "Just so you know," she said, "I'm the one who told you everything. I'm not telling anyone else. If you're going to report me, you can't prove anything. I'll say that I was joking, that I made a joke, that I was nervous, to calm you down, and you didn't come to us anymore, that these bottles have everyone's fingerprints on them. I'm not the only one who took them, and there's no more evidence. You got it." "What if I got it all on a tape recorder now?" Evelyn asked. "So what?" The girl shrugged. "A heartfelt confession. I'm not going to write it. And these conversations can't be used as evidence. I can retract what I said at any time. And you can't do anything to me." "I wasn't going to do anything to you," Evelyn said with a sigh. "I mean, I'd love to snap your head off right now. Kevin didn't tell me to. He said let him live as he lives. So live your life now and remember that you killed a man for nothing." "Oh, don't get all moralistic on me," the girl said. But Evelyn got up and went to the door. Robert was standing at the door. "Are you finished?" he asked Sukhov. "Yes, thank you for letting us talk," nodded Evelyn. "Evelyn, are you in no hurry?" Suddenly the guy asked, "Can you give me a ride into town? Because my car is still in repair, and now it's already at 100. Where are you going?" Jenna perked up. "I don't know yet," Robert answered. "But I can't live with you anymore. You were eavesdropping." The girl said it in the most indignant tone. "Shame on you." "Who said anything about shame?" Robert sighed. "It wasn't even necessary to eavesdrop. You're lucky your parents aren't here, or they'd know what you're up to. Step aside, and I'll pack a bag." Evelyn brought Robert back to her place. "And with a bat until you find an apartment," she said indifferently. "The armchair bed is all yours." Camille took a tray out of the oven and admired the pies lying on it. They were nice and crispy, fluffy and fragrant. "Why are you? You've been like that since this morning." The voice of my neighbor Emily sounded from behind me. "How are the kids coming?" "You guessed right," laughed the woman. "Look, they've just arrived." She nodded at the window. A car pulled up under the window, and Robert jumped out and opened the door for Evelyn. Evelyn slowly made her way out of the cabin, heavy, carrying her pregnant belly. Camille splayed her hands behind her as she hurried out of the kitchen to meet her family.